Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind the glow of screens and the endless swiping, heading instead into the salt-stained, wind-bitten world of a 19th century New England fishing village. Picture this, it's dusk, always feels like dusk here, right? The air hangs thick with the tang of brine, rotting seaweed, and yesterday's catch. You're not strolling some manicured garden path. You're crunching over crushed oyster shells and slippery kelp on the wharf, the damp chill of the North Atlantic already seeping through your woolens, promising a deeper cold come nightfall. Lanterns sway weakly on the few boats still tied up, casting long, dancing shadows that make the weathered faces of the fishermen look even more grim. Forget candlelit dinners or whispered sweet nothings in a cozy corner. Romance here, what little of it exists, is carved out between hauling nets, mending sails, and the constant, gnawing worry about the next storm or the empty nets. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the sheer physical grind of it, let alone find the energy for courtship. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment too. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Right. You're here. Circa 1830s, maybe 1840s. Gloomy Harbor, or Salt Spray Cove, or whatever grimly poetic name this particular cluster of saltbox houses clinging to the granite shore bears. Life revolves entirely around the sea, a demanding, often cruel mistress. Your days start before dawn, hauling yourself out of a narrow bed you likely share with a sibling or two, the chill in the unheated room sharp enough to make your teeth ache. Your muscles are perpetually sore from rowing the dory, pulling sodden nets heavy with cod or haddock, splitting and salting the catch on the slippery flakes, those wooden platforms reeking eternally of fish guts. Survival isn't aspirational, it's the baseline. Every decision, every ounce of energy, is measured against its contribution to getting through the winter. Starvation wasn't some abstract historical concept. It was a memory your grandparents carried, a threat that lingered just offshore with the autumn fog. So, where does date night fit into this? It doesn't. Not in the way you'd recognize. Forget leisurely walks hand in hand. Forget privacy. Your entire existence is communal, scrutinized. Courtship here is less about stolen kisses and more about demonstrating practical value within the brutal economy of the village. If you're a young man, your prospects hinge entirely on your seaworthiness. Can you handle a boat in a squall? Are your hands strong and calloused from hauling line? Do you own a share in a vessel, however small? Or are you doomed to be a low-paid, land-bound laborer, stacking barrels or chopping wood? That's your resume. Your Tinder profile, if you will, written in blisters and saltwater burns. For a young woman, it's about proven domestic skill. Can you salt cod efficiently, preserving precious protein? Can you knit stormproof mittens, mend nets with strong, invisible stitches, bake dents, sustaining bread with coarse flour, manage a meager household budget, and bear children likely to survive infancy? Romance is secondary to resilience. A potential partner is evaluated, quite coldly sometimes, as an economic unit. Can they pull their weight? Will their family bring useful connections? Maybe access to a better fishing ground, or a relative who owns a smack? Now, here's a mainstream historical fact that underpins everything. Marriage ages were often later than you might think. Especially for men. Why? Simple economics. A young man couldn't even think of supporting a wife and inevitable children until he'd accrued enough skill, reputation, and capital. Perhaps a partial ownership in a boat, or enough savings to build or rent a tiny house. This often meant his late 20s or even 30s. Young women, while often marrying a bit younger, still frequently waited into their early to mid-20s. Courtship, such as it was a slow, cautious dance constrained by these harsh realities. Historians still argue whether this later age fostered stronger, more pragmatic partnerships born of shared hardship, or simply prolonged a state of anxious limbo, stealing the youthful spark we associate with romance. The quirky tidbit: forget fancy bouquets. The language of flowers here was the language of necessity and, well, chaperones. Seriously, privacy was non-existent. Young people were never truly alone together before marriage. Every interaction happened under the watchful eyes of family, neighbors, or the entire congregation. A walk along the shingle beach? Expect your mother, or her mother, or some sharp-eyed auntie to be trailing a discreet 10 paces behind, knitting needles clicking like a metronome measuring your propriety. Even sitting together in the cramped, smoky parlor after supper meant sharing the space with siblings, parents, and probably a visiting neighbor discussing the price of mackerel. That intense lack of solitude fundamentally shaped how affection was expressed, through glances held a fraction too long across the crowded meeting house, or through practical gestures laden with meaning. Which brings us to the gifts. Forget chocolates. Imagine receiving a carefully carved wooden button for your best jacket, or a small, particularly fat cod wrapped in seaweed, presented with gruff solemnity. Or maybe your sweetheart spent hours meticulously darning your thickest work socks. These weren't romantic gestures by our standards. They were declarations of capability, of investment in the other's survival. A fat cod said, "I'm a good provider." A darned sock said, "I'll keep you warm and functional." A whittled button said, "I have the skill and patience to make something lasting." Under the constant, damp gaze of the community, these tokens were the closest thing to a love letter. So, as you settle deeper, feeling the imagined chill of that coastal wind, understand this: date night in this world wasn't an event. It was a slow, public accumulation of evidence. Evidence of endurance, skill, and the faint, stubborn hope that partnership might make the relentless grind of existence just a fraction more bearable against the vast, indifferent grey of the Atlantic. The flickering lantern light on the wharf isn't setting a mood. It's a warning beacon. Section 2. Your alarm clock isn't a chime. It's the raw, grating screech of gulls fighting over scraps down by the wharf, slicing through the pre-dawn gloom like rusty knives. There's no snooze button. One moment you're buried deep in the scratchy, thin wool of your blanket, clinging to the fading warmth of sleep like a shipwrecked sailor to driftwood. The next, you're hauling your stiff, aching body upright. The air in the cramped loft bedroom is frigid, thick with the damp salt smell that permeates everything: wood, wool, skin. Your breath hangs visible in the weak grey light filtering through the single, small window, already crusted with salt spray. Forget lounging in bed scrolling. Survival demands you move before the light fully breaks. Downstairs, the hearth offers the only real warmth, banked low overnight. You stir the embers, add precious, split wood, each log carefully counted, and feel the bite of the stone floor through worn socks. Breakfast isn't avocado toast. It's hardtack dunked in weak, bitter tea, maybe a scrap of salt pork if the last haul was decent. Chewing feels like work. Your jaw aches. You're already tired, and the day hasn't truly begun. This relentless dawn ritual isn't just your life. It's the shared, grinding reality for everyone over the age of 6 in the village. Romance. It's buried under layers of fatigue and the immediate, crushing weight of necessity. That picturesque sunrise over the churning grey water, it's just the start of 14 hours of back-breaking labor. You shrug on layers: coarse linen shirt, thick wool sweater smelling faintly of fish and wood smoke, oilskin outerwear if rain threatens. Every garment is heavy, practical armor against the elements. Outside, the village stirs. Doors creak open, spilling thin yellow lamplight onto muddy paths. Figures, hunched against the pervasive damp chill, move with a weary purpose towards the harbor. Men and older boys head straight for the boats, their boots crunching on gravel and shell. There's a low murmur of voices, mostly functional commands. Check the lines on the Jane Marie, barrels ready for the smack. Laughter is rare, sharp, and brief. The sea doesn't care about your mood. It only respects strength, vigilance, and a profound understanding of its moods. Women and girls turn towards different duties, feeding chickens scrawny from pecking at salty ground, milking the single, bony family cow, hauling water from the well, a long, heavy trek. The younger children are already tasked with gathering firewood or kelp for the garden, small hands red and chapped. The sheer volume of work required just to maintain basic existence is staggering. Every calorie consumed must be earned or preserved through intense physical effort. Leisure is a luxury no one can afford, least of all young people dreaming of connection. This is where the mainstream historical fact hits hard. The average workday easily stretched to 12 to 16 hours, 6 days a week, with Sunday reserved for church and rest, if you were lucky. Fishing wasn't a 9 to 5. It was governed by tides, weather, and the desperate need to fill the hold. Processing the catch, gutting, splitting, salting, drying, was equally demanding and time-sensitive. Rot meant ruin. On land, maintaining homes against the corrosive salt air, preparing food from scratch, making and mending clothes and gear, these were endless cycles. Energy was a finite resource, meticulously budgeted like the last grains of sugar in the pantry. By the time dusk fell again, bodies were spent husks. Muscles screamed, hands were raw and cracked, minds fogged with exhaustion. The idea of mustering the vigor for a lively conversation, let alone a flirtatious stroll, feels almost laughable. You're more likely to collapse onto a stool by the fire and stare blankly at the flames, fighting to keep your eyes open long enough to eat some boiled potato and dried fish. Historians still argue whether this shared, crushing workload actually fostered a unique kind of partnership built on mutual respect for endurance, or if it simply smothered individual desires and personalities under a suffocating blanket of communal toil. Did couples find silent solidarity in their shared exhaustion? Or did the grind leave them too drained to nurture any spark beyond basic cooperation? The quirky tidbit emerges from this bleak landscape, born of necessity and a dark, pragmatic humor. Forget candlelit dinners. Imagine your potential sweetheart proving their worth and their interest through the universal village currency, cod liver oil. Yes, really. Producing it was a vile, smelly process. Huge barrels of cod livers would be left to rot slightly, fermenting under the sun or rain, until the oil rose to the top and could be skimmed off. The stench was legendary, clinging to clothes and skin. But this oil was liquid gold, used for everything from waterproofing boots and leather to treating aches and pains, and most importantly, as a vital, if revolting, dietary supplement to prevent scurvy and malnutrition during the long winter months. A young man might present a small, carefully corked bottle of his family's best rendered oil to a young woman he admired. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't perfumed, but it screamed, louder than any sonnet, "I value your health and survival. I can provide this essential thing." Conversely, a young woman known for her skill in rendering particularly clear, potent oil, less fishy taste was a prized quality, relatively speaking, held a certain grim allure. It was a bizarre, oily token of affection, a testament to the fact that in this world, practicality wasn't just romantic, it was essential. Think of it as the ultimate I care about your well-being gift, wrapped in the pungent aroma of decaying fish guts. So, as you picture yourself hauling a dripping net, fingers numb, back screaming, or endlessly stirring a cauldron of livers under drizzle, remember, date night didn't stand a chance against the dawn. Energy devoted to courtship was energy stolen from survival. Affection had to be woven into the fabric of the work itself. A shared glance while mending nets on the wharf, a brief moment passing a heavy bucket, a rare, quiet word exchanged over the gutting table. It was romance measured not in hours, but in stolen moments, in the silent understanding of shared hardship, and in the grimly practical value of a bottle of oil that promised you might both survive to see another spring. The village wakes not to birdsong, but to the relentless call of the sea and the grinding demands of an existence balanced perpetually on the edge. The sunrise isn't a herald of possibility. It's a starting gun for another day of labor where love, if it blooms at all, does so in the cracks between stones. Section 3. So, you manage a fleeting smile across the gutting table. Maybe pass a bucket with fingers brushing for half a second too long. A spark, right? A tiny flicker in the grey monotony. Don't get comfortable. Before that spark can even warm your chilled bones, you feel it. The weight of eyes. Not just one pair. Multiple. It's like trying to have a private thought in the middle of Grand Central Station. Except everyone here knows your grandparents' most embarrassing secrets. Privacy. Forget it. You're never alone. Not truly. Especially not if you're young and potentially marriageable. Welcome to the world where chaperones aren't occasional nuisances. They're your constant, damp, wool-clad shadows. Your every interaction, every glance, every mumbled word exists under microscope powered by village gossip and puritanical paranoia. Picture trying to have a conversation with a person who makes your pulse skip when you're hauling water from the well. Seems innocent enough. Think again. Your mother, or her mother, or great-aunt Agatha, a woman who looks like she was carved from driftwood and disapproval, materializes beside you, ostensibly to check the water level or complain about the quality of the rope. Her knitting needles click-clack with the rhythm of a metronome set to propriety. You discuss the weather, the shocking price of salt, the peculiar growth on Old Man Henderson's prize pig. Anything but what you might actually want to say. The air crackles with unspoken words, thick as the fish stew simmering back in the cramped cottage. That hopeful spark? Doused faster than a candle in a nor'easter. Here's the mainstream historical fact that built this prison. The intense community surveillance stemmed directly from the Puritan roots of these New England settlements. Puritan ideals emphasized communal responsibility, strict moral codes, and the absolute necessity of preventing sin before it could take root. This wasn't just about avoiding scandal. It was about maintaining the spiritual and social fabric of the entire village. Premarital sex wasn't just a personal failing. It was a communal catastrophe, threatening divine wrath on their already precarious existence. Courtship wasn't a private affair. It was a public process scrutinized for any deviation from the narrow path of acceptability. Reputation was everything. A young woman seen as forward or a young man deemed reckless could find their marriage prospects evaporating overnight. Historians still argue whether this oppressive oversight genuinely fostered stronger, more stable marriages based on careful vetting, or if it simply bred resentment, hypocrisy, and a thriving underground of whispered rumors that could be just as damaging as any actual transgression. Did it prevent mistakes, or just ensure mistakes were hidden until they exploded? Now for the quirky, slightly desperate tidbit born from this suffocating scrutiny, the coded language of shared chores. Since direct conversation was often impossible, young people developed ingenious, utterly mundane ways to signal interest. It was like espionage conducted with buckets and brooms. Pay attention. If a young woman deliberately lingered near the woodpile when a particular young man was known to be fetching logs, that wasn't coincidence. It was a calculated risk. If she offered him the less chipped water dipper when he came to the well, under Aunt Agatha's watchful eye, naturally, it was practically a declaration. For the young men, it was about demonstrating capability specifically near her domain. Mending the fence by her family's vegetable patch with exaggerated diligence. Offering to lift an unusually heavy barrel near where she was salting fish. Even something as simple as how he stacked firewood near her back door could be interpreted. A particularly neat stack might signal orderliness and care. The most daring, the strategically forgotten item. Leaving a carefully whittled peg or a small, smooth stone near a place she frequented. The communal bake oven, the well path, hoping she'd find it and know it was from him. It was a silent, practical semaphore, a way to scream "Notice me," through the utterly boring medium of daily survival tasks. Finding a perfect clam shell placed conspicuously on the well ledge wasn't just a shell. It was a love letter written in calcium carbonate. Imagine the frustration. You share a hymn book at the interminable Sunday service. Your shoulders touch. For 3 seconds, electricity crackles in the musty air thick with damp wool and piety. You risk a sideways glance. Her eyes meet yours. Then, cough. Her father shifts pointedly beside her. The moment shatters. Or you're walking back from checking the lobster pots, a rare moment of solitude. And you see her walking ahead, carrying a basket of wet laundry. Your heart leaps. You quicken your pace, only to hear the unmistakable shuffle and wheeze of Mrs. Gable emerging from the fish shed, her beady eyes missing nothing. You slow down, staring intently at a seagull as if it holds the secrets of the universe. Romance becomes a series of near misses, stifled sighs, and conversations conducted entirely about mackerel migration patterns while your chaperone nods approvingly. The village isn't just a collection of houses. It's a panopticon built of salt-bleached wood and inherited suspicion. The walls have ears, and the windows have eyes, and the old women knitting by the hearth are the ninjas of niceness, enforcing a code as unyielding as the granite coastline. Every potential moment of connection is mediated, monitored, and meticulously controlled. That spark you felt? It doesn't die. Exactly. It just gets buried deep, banked like the coals in the hearth, forced to find warmth in the tiniest, most sanctioned interactions. A shared smile during the harvest hymn, a murmured good haul. At the wharf, the brief, intense meeting of eyes across a room crowded with relatives discussing the alarming price of flour. Love, in this environment, isn't a roaring fire. It's the stubborn, persistent ember that refuses to be extinguished, glowing faintly beneath layers of wool, watchfulness, and the constant, grinding work of staying alive against the indifferent sea. Your shadow isn't just your own. It's lengthened and multiplied by the community that claims you, body and soul, until the day you marry. And even then, the watchfulness merely shifts its focus. Section 4. 6 days of bone-aching labor grind past, each dawn bleeding into dusk with a monotonous rhythm of waves on shingle. Your muscles scream, your hands are permanently pruned and nicked, your thoughts narrow to the next task, the next haul, the next meal. Then, Sunday arrives. Not with a fanfare, but with a profound, almost oppressive, stillness. The gulls still screech, the wind still whines through the chinks in the clapboard, but the frantic energy of work vanishes, replaced by a heavy, expectant quiet. It's the closest thing to a pause this village knows. And for you, trapped in the suffocating watchfulness of chaperones and communal eyes, Sunday offers something else, the sanctioned gathering. Forget the pub, forget the park bench. The one place where everyone congregates, where you might actually see that person who quickens your pulse without needing an excuse involving fish barrels or well ropes, is the stark, unadorned meeting house perched on the windswept hill overlooking the grey harbour. Church. It's not about piety. Not really. It's about the only sanctioned social event on the calendar. The prime venue for stolen glances, loaded silences, and the electric current of village gossip. You wake not to the gull's battle cry, but to the slow, solemn tolling of the single bell in the meeting house steeple. The sound echoes dully across the cove, a metallic heartbeat calling the faithful, the bored, and the desperately hopeful. There's a different kind of scramble now. Out come the Sunday best clothes, woolen dresses stiff with starch and age, scratchy as burlap against your salt-roughened skin, coats brushed free of the worst fish scales but still smelling faintly of brine and wood smoke. Every button is fumbled with cold fingers, every lace tightened just so. It's not vanity, it's armor. Your appearance today is your public resume, scrutinized by every matron and potential in-law. A loose thread, a scuffed shoe, a slightly crooked bonnet ribbon, that's fodder for the whisper network before the final hymn is sung. You trudge up the muddy track towards the meeting house, feeling the damp cold seep through your inadequate soles, the wind trying its best to steal your carefully pinned hat. Inside, it's scarcely warmer. Hard, backless benches offer no comfort, only a new kind of ache. The air hangs thick with the scent of damp wool, candle wax, and the faint, ever-present tang of fish that clings to everyone and everything. Light filters weakly through small, high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the gloom. The preacher, a gaunt figure radiating stern conviction, ascends the pulpit. His voice booms, echoing off the bare walls, delivering fire and brimstone, warnings about damnation, and lengthy dissertations on obscure Old Testament genealogies. It's interminable. Your mind wanders. Your backside goes numb. But your eyes are busy. Here's the mainstream historical fact that made this gathering unavoidable. Church attendance wasn't just expected. It was often legally mandated and meticulously recorded by the town clerk. Missing service without a watertight excuse, like being actively lost at sea or demonstrably at death's door, could land you a fine, public censure, or worse, damage your family's standing irreparably. The meeting house was the absolute center of community life, the only place where everyone, from the wealthiest boat owner to the lowliest hired hand, gathered regularly. It was the courtroom, the newsroom, and crucially, the social arena. Your presence was noted, your demeanor judged. Who sat where, who arrived with whom, who dared to look bored during the third hour of the sermon on the sins of Sodom. It all fed the insatiable gossip mill. Historians still argue whether this enforced gathering genuinely strengthened community bonds through shared ritual, or if it primarily functioned as a high-stakes surveillance operation and reputation market, where social capital was traded on glances and whispers. The quirky tidbit, the absolute, nerve-wracking tension of the hymnal. Shared hymnals were common, and when the congregation laboriously rose to sing one of the few dirge-like hymns they all knew by heart, it presented a rare, terrifying opportunity. If you were strategically seated, often arranged by watchful parents, you might find yourself sharing the same weathered, dog-eared book with them. Your hands might brush on the rough paper as you both reach to turn a page. Your shoulders might press together for the briefest moment as you both lean in to squint at the tiny notes. You might dare a sideways glance, not at the words, but at their profile illuminated by the flickering candlelight, catching the curve of their cheek, the way their lips formed the somber words. The shared hymnal became a covert communication device, a physical bridge in a world starved of touch. A lingering finger near theirs on the page margin, a slight nudge as the hymn ended. These were monumental events, charged with more meaning than any love letter could convey. The rest of the congregation might be bellowing about the wages of sin, but your entire universe shrinks to the shared square foot of paper and the agonizingly close presence beside you. Was that nudge intentional? Did their hand linger? The sermon that follows becomes a blur, your mind replaying those 3 minutes of potential connection on a loop, dissecting every microgesture. Then comes the real action, the milling about afterwards. The fellowship. People shuffle slowly out into the weak sunlight or the drizzle, lingering in clumps. This is where the gossip ignites. The older women gather like crows on a fence, eyes sharp, voices low but carrying. Did you see young Eli Carter? Sat with the Higgins girl the whole service. Bold. Martha Peabody wore her mother's cameo, signaling she's open to offers, you think. Notice how Samuel Dodge barely looked at Abigail Fuller. After all that talk last month, scandal brewing, mark my words. Every gesture, every garment, every interaction is parsed for hidden meaning. A young man offering his arm to help a young woman navigate a muddy patch is dissected for intent. A shared laugh, muted, of course, this is still church property, is analyzed for undue familiarity. Reputations are cemented or shattered in these post-sermon huddles. It's brutal, efficient, and utterly inescapable. You try to hover near them, maybe exchange a few sanctioned words about the weather, bracing wind today, wouldn't you say? Or the sermon, quite lengthy. All while acutely aware of the dozens of eyes noting the distance between you, the duration of the exchange, the tone of voice. It's exhausting. It's exhilarating. It's the closest thing to a social life you've got. A compliment on a new bonnet ribbon, delivered within earshot of a chaperone, feels like a daring declaration. A shared, almost imperceptible eye roll during Deacon Pratt's interminable prayer feels like a secret pact. So, as you trudge back down the hill towards another week of relentless toil, the preacher's warnings about eternal fire fading, you carry something else, the memory of a shared hymnal page, the echo of a murmured pleasantry, the weight of the gossip you know is already swirling. Date night, here isn't dinner and a show. It's an endurance test on a hard bench, a high-wire act of stolen glances and coded comments performed under the unblinking gaze of the entire village, soundtracked by grim hymns and the relentless judgment of the righteous. The meeting house isn't a sanctuary. It's the social thunderdome, where affection, like everything else, must be endured publicly, parsed meticulously, and survived. Section 5. So, you've endured the sermon's drone, survived the post-church gossip gauntlet, maybe even managed a sanctioned good day near the rain barrel. A tiny ember of possibility glows. But how do you fan it? How do you say, I see you, amidst the fish guts and grinding toil, and I think we might make this brutal existence slightly less bleak together. Forget roses. Forget chocolates. Forget anything that doesn't serve a direct, immediate purpose in the grim arithmetic of survival. Here, courtship speaks the language of the practical. Your tokens of affection aren't whispers of romance. They're declarations of utility, survival skills carved in wood or wrapped in seaweed. Welcome to the world where love gets measured in pounds of cod and the fineness of a whittled edge. Picture it. You've spent hours by the flickering, unreliable light of the hearth fire after the endless workday. Your hands, already cracked and sore from hauling nets, now ache from the precise, repetitive motion of the knife. Shavings of dense, salt-hardened oak or maybe a rare piece of smooth maple curl onto the packed earth floor. You're not crafting a sonnet, you're shaping a button. A single, sturdy, perfectly functional button for a work jacket. Or perhaps a toggle for an oilskin coat. The design is simple, maybe a subtle rope twist carved around the edge, or a tiny, stylized anchor. It's not flashy, it won't sparkle, but it's yours. It represents hours stolen from sleep, skill honed through necessity, and a quiet, determined focus. Presenting this small, hard-won object isn't about flattery. It's a statement. I have the patience, the dexterity, and the commitment to make things that last. I can contribute. You hand it over, perhaps near the communal well under the watchful eye of her younger brother tasked as sentry, muttering something gruff like, "Saw yours was cracked." No fanfare, no poetry, just a solid piece of usefulness passing from your calloused hand to hers. The weight of it, the thought behind it in a world where every minute is precious, that's the language. Then there's the fish. Not just any fish. A particularly fine, fat cod, gleaming silver and firm-fleshed, caught on your line, handled with care. You wrap it in fresh, damp kelp to keep it pristine, presenting it not with a flourish, but with a quiet gravity, maybe to her father first, acknowledging his authority. Caught an extra. The meaning screams louder than any serenade. This isn't just protein, it's proof of your competence as a provider. It's insurance against a hungry day. It's the foundation of survival. A gift of fish says, bluntly, I can feed you. I can feed the children we might have. For the young women, the currency shifts slightly, but remains rooted in tangible skill. She might mend his nets. Not just any mend, but an invisible, incredibly strong repair, the knots perfectly tensioned, the netting realigned so flawlessly it won't snag or tear again easily. She presents the neatly folded section of net, perhaps through a brother or left near his dory. No note. The work speaks for itself. I have the skill and patience to maintain what you risk your life to use. I can preserve your tools, your safety. Or maybe she bakes him a small, dense loaf of rye bread, sweetened with precious molasses. Not a cake, but sustaining fuel. I can transform scant resources into strength. I can nourish you. These aren't gifts, they are resumes written in fish scales, net twine, and coarse flour. Here's the mainstream historical fact that underscores this practicality. Marriage in these communities was fundamentally an economic contract. While affection could grow, the initial foundation was built on complementary skills and resources that ensured the new household's viability. Gifts like carved tools, fish, or demonstrations of mending prowess weren't romantic gestures. They were tangible proof offered during the extended, public vetting process of courtship. They were down payments on a partnership designed for survival. A young man proving his ability to provide protein and his skill with essential crafts, like woodworking for boat repairs, was showcasing his value. A young woman demonstrating exceptional preservation skills, salting, smoking, net mending, baking, or textile production, spinning wool, knitting socks that wouldn't unravel in a storm, was advertising her indispensable contribution. Historians still argue whether this ruthless pragmatism stripped courtship of all genuine feeling, turning it into a cold transaction, or if the shared understanding of life's harsh necessities fostered a deeper, more resilient form of respect and partnership that modern romance often overlooks. Was it love, or was it a mutually beneficial survival pact? Now, for the quirky, slightly heartbreaking tidbit. The fish proposal. Yes, it was a thing, though not official. The most significant, unspoken gift of fish wasn't just a fat cod. It was a specific, rare catch presented at a specific time. Imagine a young man, after months, maybe years, of careful demonstrations, the buttons, the firewood stacking, the respectful nods to her father, finally hauling in a near-mythical prize, a huge, winter-caught cod, or perhaps a perfectly intact lobster of unusual size. This wasn't for the family barrel. This was presented directly, solemnly, to the young woman herself, ideally witnessed by her family. The act was laden with meaning. Presenting such a valuable, hard-won resource directly to her was the closest equivalent to getting down on one knee. It screamed, I am capable of securing rare bounty. I offer this symbol of my ability to you, personally. Her acceptance, taking the fish, perhaps with a slight, barely perceptible nod, was the tacit yes. No dramatic declarations. Just the heavy, cold weight of a prime cod passing between them, sealing the unspoken understanding under the grey, watching sky. Rejection. If she demurred, suggesting he give it to her mother instead, or worse, publicly handed it to her younger brother to clean, the message was devastatingly clear. The rejected suitor would then have to eat the evidence of his failure, quite literally, while the village gossip mill churned with the news. It was proposal and potential humiliation, wrapped in kelp. So, as you hold that small, perfectly carved peg, or smooth the invisible mend on the net, or contemplate the sheer, unromantic bulk of a good cod, Understand this, date night gifts here weren't about luxury or fleeting pleasure. They were about endurance. They were promises written in the calligraphy of callus and salt stains. A button said, "I'll help keep you clothed and functional." A fish said, "I'll help keep you alive." A mended net said, "I'll help keep you safe." In a world perpetually balanced on the knife edge of want, the most profound declaration of affection wasn't "I adore you," but "I am useful to you. Together, we might just make it." The hearth fire doesn't flicker with candlelight romance. It illuminates the hard, necessary work of building something that lasts, one whittled shaving, one salted fillet, one perfectly tensioned knot at a time. Section 6. So, you've received a whittled peg, a fat cod wrapped in kelp, maybe even endured the nerve-wracking spectacle of the hymnal nudge. Hope flickers. But how do you say something? How do you whisper, "I think of you," or "Meet me by the big rock after mending," or even the terrifying, "My feelings are more"? You can't just blurt it out. Not with Aunt Agatha's knitting needles clicking like Morse code for "behave" beside you. Direct words are dangerous, liable to be overheard, misinterpreted, and broadcast across the cove before supper. Forget love letters sealed with wax. Forget sonnets. Here, the language of the heart is whispered in rustling bundles of dried thyme, or rosemary, or maybe a particularly pungent clump of sage. Welcome to the fragrant, coded world of herb courtship, where a sprig of lavender screams louder than any ballad. Picture this. You stumble out of your cramped, fish-scented cottage one grey dawn, heading for the well. There, tucked just under the worn threshold, or perhaps balanced precariously on the water bucket handle, lies a small, tight bundle. Not fancy, just common garden herbs, carefully dried and tied with a simple strand of rough twine. No note, no name, just greenery smelling faintly of earth and summer past. You pick it up, your fingers tracing the brittle leaves. Is it? Could it be? Your heart does a clumsy pirouette against your ribs. This isn't random. This is a message. Deliberate, fragrant, and utterly deniable. Oh, that old time? Must have blown there in the wind, the giver could innocently claim if challenged. But you know. And the giver knows you know. It's the closest thing to a private text message this village gets. Here's the mainstream historical fact that made this possible. Nearly every household, no matter how poor, maintained a small herb garden. This wasn't for culinary flair. It was essential medicine, pest control, and domestic necessity. Thyme fought coughs and infections tucked into poultices. Lavender masked odors, a constant battle, and soothed headaches in infusions. Rosemary was believed to strengthen memory and ward off illness. Sage purified the air. Mint settled sour stomachs. Pennyroyal. Well, pennyroyal had more discreet uses young women might desperately need. These plants were vital, practical tools. Giving them wasn't inherently romantic. It was neighborly. Which specific herb was given, and how it was presented, however, opened a clandestine channel. Historians still argue whether this symbolic language was a widespread, understood code, or a collection of intensely local, personal signals whose meanings shifted from village to village and couple to couple. Was it a shared cultural cipher, or desperate improvisation? Now, the quirky, deeply practical dictionary of this botanical love code. Thyme, the workhorse herb, signified courage, strength, endurance. A bundle left might say, "I see your strength," or "Have courage, we endure together." Practical, yes, but in this context, deeply affirming. Finding time tucked into your bait box before a long trip? That was a potent come back safe. Lavender, the closest thing to romance they dared. It meant devotion, calmness, purity. A risky gift, implying deeper feelings. Left secretly, it whispered, "My thoughts are with you," or "You bring me peace amidst the chaos." Also, its potent scent masking the pervasive fish odor was, in itself, a small act of tenderness. A young man reeking of cod liver oil presenting lavender? That was practically a marriage proposal in fragrance. Rosemary, remembrance. This was heavy. Given before a long voyage, it pleaded, don't forget me. Left for someone grieving, it offered solace. But between young lovers, it carried the weight of longing, I will remember you always, or remember this moment. A sprig found in your Sunday hatband was a powerful, silent vow. Sage, wisdom, protection, good health. A practical blessing, stay well, be safe, I wish you wisdom in your choices. Sometimes, given after a near disaster at sea, it was a profound sigh of relief made manifest. Less overtly romantic, but deeply caring. Mint, hospitality, warmth. Could be innocent, could be an invitation to linger near her doorway. Context was everything. Paired with lavender, definitely not just for tea. A tangled, slightly muddy route, like valerian, my thoughts are troubled, I need to see you. Risky. Required a prearranged understanding. Finding valerian meant scrambling for a plausible reason to be near the giver's usual path later. The delivery was as crucial as the herb itself. Tucked into a tool handle he used daily. Slipped into the pocket of her apron hanging on the line. Left on the specific rock where she collected mussels. Each location added another layer of meaning, known only to the recipient and the hopeful sender. A bundle of rosemary left on his dory seat screamed anxiety about an impending voyage. The same rosemary left on her windowsill late at night whispered a much more intimate remember me. Imagine the tension. You find sage on your net mending stool. Is it just Mrs. Dobbs being neighborly because you sneezed yesterday? Or is it them, wishing you health, subtly saying they care? You clutch a small bundle of lavender you picked at dusk, heart pounding. How to get it to them without being seen? You wait for a moment when the path to the well is clear, dash forward, fumble it onto the bucket handle, and retreat, hoping no curtain twitched. Later, you watch, barely breathing, as they approach the well, notice it, pick it up. Do they pause? Do their fingers tighten slightly on the stems? Do they glance around, perhaps towards your cottage? That tiny pause, that almost invisible reaction, is your entire universe for the day. It's agonizing. It's exhilarating. It's the only private conversation you get. So, as you breathe in the sharp, clean scent of that unexpected bundle of thyme, understand this, date night whispers weren't spoken, they were rustled. They were delivered in the quiet currency of the garden, fragrant tokens carrying the weight of feelings too dangerous for daylight. A sprig of lavender wasn't just a plant, it was a secret shouted into the wind, a fragile, aromatic bridge across the chasm of watchfulness and work. In a world starved of poetry, the humble, essential herbs became the sonnets, their meanings blooming not in fancy vases, but in the raw, hopeful cracks between survival and the desperate human need to say, simply, I see you. Section 7. Autumn's fierce beauty was always a lie. The fiery maples, the crisp air smelling of apples and wood smoke, it was just the ocean lulling you into a false sense of security before it bared its teeth. The gales hit first, howling down from the Arctic like vengeful spirits, slamming into the saltbox houses with enough force to rattle the very bones of the settlement. Then came the snow, not gentle flakes, but driven horizontal bullets of ice, scouring the land, piling into impassable drifts against doors and windows. The harbor freezes over, not with a smooth sheet, but with a chaotic jumble of ice slabs grinding against each other like the teeth of some frozen leviathan. The boats are hauled up, cradled on timber frames like beached whales, useless. The world shrinks. Radically. The village isn't just isolated, it's entombed. And you're trapped. Not just by the snow, but by the walls of your own home, crammed in with your entire family, grandparents, unmarried aunts, squalling infants, and the pervasive, damp chill that no fire seems able to conquer. Forget stolen walks or herb bundles left on paths. Winter doesn't just kill courtship, it forces it into the suffocating, unromantic crucible of the overcrowded hearth. Privacy evaporates like breath in the frigid air. Date night becomes survival in close quarters, under the unblinking eyes of kin. Picture the scene. Outside, the wind screams like a banshee. Inside, the single main room, kitchen, living area, workspace, all crammed into one, is thick with the smell of wet wool drying, simmering fish stew, wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the underlying tang of mildew creeping up from the damp corners. The hearth fire is the sun around which this tiny, strained universe orbits. You huddle close, shoulder to shoulder with siblings, parents, that snoring uncle, everyone vying for precious inches of warmth. There's no escaping each other. If you're lucky, your sweetheart's family lives next door, but the path between might as well be the Sahara. Visits are rare, formal, and involve the entire household. So, if they are in your house, maybe seeking shelter during a blizzard or for a rare communal task like wool carding, the proximity is agonizing. They're right there, across the hearth, close enough to see the flecks of grey in their eyes, the way the firelight catches a loose strand of hair by their temple. Close enough to touch. And you can't. Not a finger. Not a word beyond the utterly mundane. Every glance feels like a shout in the oppressive quiet between howls of wind. Every accidental brush of a sleeve as you pass a bowl of boiled potatoes feels like an electric shock. The chaperones aren't just present. They're unavoidable, part of the human furniture of the room. Your grandmother's rheumy eyes miss nothing. Your father's low grumble punctuates any attempt at conversation. Here's the mainstream historical fact that defined this claustrophobic reality. Heating and lighting were constant, consuming struggles. Firewood was a precious commodity, carefully rationed. A single hearth fire had to heat the entire dwelling, cook food, dry clothes, and provide light during the long, dark hours. Candles or whale oil lamps were expensive luxuries, used sparingly. This meant everyone gathered in the main room, near the fire, for most of the waking, and even some sleeping, hours. Activities were limited to what could be done in that cramped, smoky space. Mending nets or clothes, whittling, spinning wool, preparing food, caring for infants. The sheer, unrelenting proximity, combined with the stress of dwindling supplies and the constant threat of storms breaching the roof or chimney fires, created a pressure cooker of simmering tensions and enforced intimacy. Historians still argue whether these long winter confinements fostered deeper familial bonds and understanding, or simply amplified irritations and resentments, turning small quirks into unbearable annoyances and stifling any hope of private connection between young couples. Did shared hardship build unity, or did cabin fever breed silent desperation? The quirky, slightly absurd tidbit born from this enforced closeness? The courting candle. Now, this wasn't some romantic device. It was pure pragmatism twisted into a social regulator. In some households, a specific, often ornate, candle holder would be placed prominently on the mantel. If a young man was visiting, with his parents, naturally, and only because the weather allowed a treacherous dash next door, the host father would light this special candle. Its entire purpose? To limit the visit. The candle was designed to burn for a very specific, short duration, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Once it guttered out, the visit was unequivocally over. No lingering. No whispered goodbyes. Time's up. Go home. In the depths of winter, even this meager ritual was often impossible. But the principle held, sanctioned interaction was strictly metered, like precious lamp oil. In the winter confinement, without even the possibility of a courting candle visit, young couples had to resort to even more desperate, silent strategies. The shared blanket ploy. If the cold was particularly brutal, extra quilts or shared woven blankets might be distributed. Positioning was key. Could you maneuver to share the same blanket with them, even if separated by a sibling or two? The shared task subterfuge. Endless wool-kneaded carding. Could you position yourself opposite them at the carding table? The rhythmic scrape of the combs providing cover for intense, silent eye contact? Passing the salt cellar could become a 10-second epic of lingering fingers and held breath. A dropped knitting needle offered a precious 3 seconds of both heads bent close together under the table, retrieving it. Every mundane act became a potential carrier pigeon for unspoken longing. Imagine the exquisite torture. You're carding wool opposite them. Your fingers move in rhythm, pulling the fluffy mass apart. Their hands work nearby. You watch their knuckles, the curve of their wrist. The fire crackles. Your aunt drones on about the rising price of flour. Your younger brother fidgets. And across the cloud of wool fibers, your eyes lock. Just for a heartbeat. Then you both look down, cheeks flushed, hoping the heat is blamed on the fire. Later, squeezed onto a bench during the interminable evening Bible reading, Your thigh presses faintly against theirs through layers of skirt and trousers. Neither of you moves away. It's not a kiss. It's not even holding hands. It's just a line of warmth against the pervasive chill, a silent acknowledgement of presence in the suffocating crowd. It has to sustain you for weeks, months. The howling wind outside mirrors the howl of frustration inside. Spring feels like a lifetime away. Love, in this winter tomb, isn't passion. It's the quiet determination to keep that tiny spark alive through endless, frigid days and nights crammed with witnesses, fueled by stolen glances across a bowl of parsnips and the agonizingly close, untouchable warmth of the one person you desperately wish you could be alone with, just for 5 minutes. The hearth fire doesn't warm hearts. It illuminates the vast, frozen distance between two people sitting less than a foot apart. Section 8. That first drip. It's barely audible over the wind's dying moan, but it lands with the impact of a cannon shot in your soul. You're hauling water from the well, face numb, breath pluming, when you hear it. Plink. Then another. Plink. You look up. A dagger of ice hanging from the eaves gutter is weeping. A single, glistening tear falls, splashing onto the frozen mud below. It's the tiniest fissure in winter's iron grip. Hope, fragile as that droplet, stirs deep within your salt-crusted heart. Spring isn't a sudden explosion of birdsong and blossoms here. It's a slow, muddy, treacherous slog. The snowdrifts shrink reluctantly, revealing the mangled carcass of last autumn's garden and paths transformed into sucking quagmires. The harbor groans as the ice pack loosens, giant slabs grinding like millstones. Boats are inspected, caulked, readied. But for you, it means one thing, the possibility of movement. Not freedom, never that, but the chance to walk somewhere, anywhere, beyond the four walls that have felt like a prison cell for months. And maybe, just maybe, to walk near them. Date night shifts from stolen glances by the hearth to sanctioned strolls. With baggage. The village exhales, a collective gasp of relief mixed with the stench of thawing earth and things buried too long under snow. People emerge blinking, pale as grubs, squinting at the weak sun. The air still bites, but it's a damp bite now, carrying the promise of rot and renewal. Paths are passable, if you don't mind sinking ankle-deep in icy slurry with every other step. And suddenly, the strictures loosen, just a fraction. Young people might be permitted a walk. Not alone. Never alone. But perhaps down the lane towards the headland, or along the less muddy track above the shingle beach. It feels like liberty after the winter tomb. You pull on your least hole-ridden woolens, scrape the worst muck off your boots, and step outside. The weak sunlight feels shockingly bright, the wind less a knife and more a persistent shove. You breathe deep, tasting salt and wet earth and possibility. Then you see them. The entourage. Your mother adjusts her shawl, her expression carefully neutral. Her younger sister, sharp-eyed and perpetually curious, falls into step beside her. Or perhaps it is father, hands clasped behind his back, radiating stoic disapproval, accompanied by a younger sibling whose sole job seems to be to report any deviation from the path. Your heart, which had soared like a gull catching an updraft, plummets. The walk isn't for you. It's a public performance. A parade. You fall into step beside them, the object of your winter-long silent yearning. 3 feet might as well be 3 miles. The chaperones trail a mere 10 paces behind, close enough to hear every word, see every gesture. Their presence is a physical weight, a constant reminder that your every move, your every syllable, is being catalogued, analyzed, and will be dissected over supper. Here's the mainstream historical fact governing this tentative thaw. The arrival of spring dictated the entire economic and social rhythm of the village. The fishing season start was paramount, dictating repairs, provisioning, and crew assignments. This seasonal shift also loosened, slightly, the intense social confinement of winter. Walking served practical purposes, assessing storm damage to outbuildings, checking lobster pots as the ice receded, foraging for early greens like dandelion or fiddleheads to supplement dwindling winter stores. Sanctioning walks for young people under watchful eyes allowed them to participate in these necessary tasks while maintaining the strict code of propriety. It wasn't leisure, it was supervised productivity with a side of potential matchmaking. Historians still argue whether these walks genuinely offered young couples a valuable, albeit limited, opportunity to deepen acquaintance within the community's rules, or if the constant surveillance rendered them merely another form of stifling public theatre, adding frustration to the burgeoning desires of spring. The quirky tidbit, the walking stick gambit. This wasn't about support on muddy paths. It was a desperate tool for covert communication under the noses of the watchdogs. Imagine your chaperone aunt is lagging slightly, distracted by identifying a rare early bloom, or more likely, criticizing Mrs. Peabody's poorly repaired fence. You have seconds. You stoop, ostensibly to adjust your bootlace clogged with mud. As you rise, you quickly use your walking stick, a stout, necessary aid on these paths, to trace a symbol in the soft, wet earth beside their boot. A crude anchor, a single letter, a tiny heart. It's gone with the next footfall or the next shower, ephemeral as your privacy. Or perhaps, as you walk, you tap your stick rhythmically against a rock wall, a pattern they recognize. 3 slow taps, pause, 2 quick ones. Meaningless to the aunt discussing turnip yields behind you, but screaming tonight? Moonrise. To the person walking beside you, their face a careful mask. The chaperones, focused on propriety and gossip, often missed these fleeting, muddy semaphores. The walking stick, a symbol of the treacherous path, became a clandestine telegraph. Conversation is an art form practiced under duress. You discuss the weather. Endlessly. The thaw seems early this year. Still a nip in the wind, though. You comment on practicalities. Old Henderson's fence took a beating from the ice. Smelt running early in the creek, I hear. Your voice is carefully modulated, pleasant, utterly devoid of the turmoil beneath. Every topic is safe, public, boring. But beneath the bland surface, currents flow. A slight emphasis on early when discussing the smelt run might be a coded reference to hope. A shared, almost imperceptible sigh when mentioning Henderson's fence could signal mutual frustration. A brief meeting of eyes as you both pretend to admire the churning, ice-strewn grey water speaks volumes. The chaperones, busy debating the merits of different woolcardas, completely miss. The walk itself becomes secondary. It's the space between the words, the shared understanding of the ridiculous performance you're both enacting, the silent scream against the watchful eyes boring into your backs. Reaching the headland, you pause. The view is bracing, the vast, restless grey Atlantic, the jagged coastline, the village huddled below like barnacles on a rock. It should feel like freedom. But the chaperones are right there, catching their breath, scanning the horizon for signs of returning boats or, more likely, scanning you for signs of impropriety. You turn back. The walk home is quieter, the initial thrill of escape dampened by the mud sucking at your boots and the oppressive weight of the return to scrutiny. That brief glimpse of the open sea only underscores how confined you truly are. The path isn't leading to connection. It's a loop back to the same old watchful cage, just with slightly softer walls. Spring's promise feels hollow when date night means a chaperone trudge through sludge, where the most intimate exchange is a symbol scuffed into mud and instantly erased, and the deepest feeling you dare express is a profound interest in the migratory patterns of smelt. The thaw brings water, not freedom. It just makes the walls of your prison muddier. Section 9. The first boats slip out through the harbour mouth, their sails pale ghosts against the lingering morning mist. You watch from the shore, shivering despite the weak spring sun, not just from the damp chill, but from the gnawing tension in your gut. It's not just the boats heading out, it's the entire trajectory of your life. The cod run isn't just about fish, it's the ticking clock, the brutal accountant that audits your dreams. Forget choosing a wedding date based on astrological signs or venue availability. Here, the ocean's bounty, or lack thereof, dictates the calendar. Date night isn't a restaurant reservation. It's a desperate calculation of tonnage and tides, where romance bows to the grim arithmetic of survival. Your future hinges on the silver flashes in the cold, grey depths. The village holds its breath. Days stretch into weeks. Eyes scan the horizon constantly. The return of the first smacks, small, single-masted fishing vessels, triggers a flurry of activity. Men scramble onto the slick wharves, backs straining as barrels of glistening cod are hauled ashore. The air thickens with a metallic tang of fish blood and salt. Women descend, knives flashing as they gut, split, and salt the catch on the long wooden flakes. Speed is everything. Rot is the enemy. But amidst the frantic work, another assessment is happening. Not just of the fish, but of the yield. How full are the holds? How fat are the cod? How many barrels can be packed and salted before the next boat comes in? This isn't just commerce, it's the village's pulse and your personal barometer. A poor haul means tightened belts, delayed repairs, and dreams deferred. A good haul, that crackles in the air like static. Whispers start. Eyes meet across the blood-slicked wharf, carrying unspoken questions. Is it enough? Here's the mainstream historical fact that governed lives. The success or failure of the fishing season directly dictated major life events, especially marriages. A bountiful season meant financial security, however temporary. Debts could be settled, supplies laid in, perhaps a small addition built onto a cottage. Crucially, it meant a young man had proven his worth and secured the resources necessary to support a wife and the inevitable children. He could finally approach her father with a formal proposal backed by tangible evidence, the number of barrels he personally contributed to filling. Conversely, a disastrous season plunged households into uncertainty. Weddings planned for autumn might be postponed indefinitely. Engagements could stretch on for years, held hostage by the fickle sea. Historians still argue whether this direct link between ecological fortune and personal milestones created a uniquely pragmatic, resilient approach to commitment, or if it fostered chronic anxiety and resentment, turning marriage into a transactional gamble dependent on forces utterly beyond human control. Was it a partnership forged in shared dependence on nature's whims, or a cruel lottery? Now, the quirky, deeply superstitious tidbit, the mackerel marriage messenger. Mackerel, arriving in vast, shimmering schools later in the season, were vital, but carried a peculiar romantic omen. It wasn't the fish themselves, but their scales. Young women engaged in the grueling work of salting would sometimes find a single, perfectly intact mackerel scale stuck to their apron or sleeve, glinting with an iridescent sheen of blue, green, and silver. Finding one unexpectedly wasn't just a fishy nuisance. It was interpreted as a powerful sign. A scale stuck near the heart? A proposal was imminent. A scale on the hem? A long journey, likely a fishing trip, was coming, but love would endure. A scale found gleaming on the doorstep? An unexpected suitor might appear. The origin was always mysterious. Did it fly off during gutting? Was it placed deliberately by a hopeful young man risking a slimy, romantic gesture? No one knew, and asking spoiled the magic. It was a tiny, shimmering token from the sea, read like a fortune cookie written in fish skin. Finding one could send a flutter of nervous hope through even the most practical heart, a superstitious counterpoint to the harsh economic realities. Imagine the pressure. You're gutting cod, your hands numb, slick with blood and viscera. His hauling barrels nearby, muscles straining. You haven't spoken beyond necessary instructions all week. But every glance carries the weight of the season. Is he watching the tally, calculating his share? Does he meet your eye with a flicker of confidence after a particularly good haul, or avoid it after a lean one? The village buzzes with unofficial estimates. The sea sprite brought in 40 barrels, solid fish. Old man Pike Smack only managed 20, half of them scrawny. Your potential future is being measured in hundredweights of salted cod. A young man might linger near your salting table, not to flirt, but to casually mention, "My dory brought in near a ton yesterday. Good, thick fish." It's not bragging, it's reporting assets. It's his Tinder profile written in haddock. You nod, perhaps offering a rare, small smile. "Heard the gull did well too," you reply, subtly indicating you're aware of the market, of other prospects. It's courtship conducted in commodity reports. The tension builds with each returning boat. A series of good runs. You might catch his father eyeing your sturdy frame and capable hands as you haul water, mentally assessing your value as a domestic asset. A bad run. The hopeful glances stop. Conversations revert to the purely functional. The unspoken understanding hangs heavy. Not this season. Maybe next. If the cod return. If the storms spare the boats. If The sea doesn't care about your longing. It doesn't care about the whittled button you keep hidden in your pocket, or the sprig of dried lavender pressed in your Bible. It only offers what it offers. Your heart's desire is collateral on an ocean whose moods are as unpredictable as they are deadly. Date night in this context is the collective, breathless vigil on the wharf, watching the horizon for sails, translating the size of the catch into the language of possibility. A full hold means more than profit. It means the faint, shimmering chance that the careful dance of glances, herbs, and chaperoned walks might finally, against the brutal odds dictated by wind and wave, lead you out of the crowded cottage and into one of your own. The salt on your lips tastes like hope or despair, depending entirely on the silver bounty hauled from the indifferent grey deep. Section 10. The rhythmic thump hits you first, vibrating through the packed earth floor before you even see the lantern light spilling from the big barn doors. It's not the somber tolling of the meeting house bell, nor the relentless crash of waves. This is different. Livelier. Dangerous. After months of grinding work, the grey monotony broken only by winter's confinement and the tense vigil of the cod run, the village allows itself one sanctioned, collective gasp of release, the barn dance. Forget nightclubs or concert halls. This cavernous space, smelling of hay dust, old manure, damp wool, and anticipation, is the only disco gloomy harbour we'll ever know. And for you, starved of touch, starved of anything resembling uninhibited movement, it's a terrifying, electrifying glimpse of paradise. With strings attached. Lots of strings. Date night transforms into a high-stakes ballet of calibrated proximity and stolen seconds of contact, played out under the flickering shadows and the unblinking eyes of the entire village. You approach, heart hammering against your ribs like a caged bird. The noise swells, the frantic, reeling scrape of fiddle strings, the rhythmic stomp of boots on hard earth, the low roar of voices released from their usual hushed restraint. Lanterns hung from rough beams cast swaying pools of light, illuminating swirling skirts and flushed faces. The air is thick, warm, heavy with sweat and wood smoke and the faint, underlying scent of the animals usually housed here. It feels illicit. Exhilarating. You scan the crowd, a shifting tapestry of familiar faces suddenly animated, almost unrecognizable. And then you see them. Standing near the cider barrel, maybe, looking equally wide-eyed and apprehensive. Your pulse spikes. This is it. The one place, the only place, where sanctioned touch exists. Where the suffocating blanket of propriety lifts, just enough, to allow hands to brush, bodies to orbit close, for fleeting, breathtaking seconds. Here's the mainstream historical fact that made these dances culturally explosive yet necessary. Puritan communities held a deep suspicion of dance, viewing it as a potential gateway to sin and disorder. Yet, in these isolated, hardscrabble fishing villages, the practical need for social cohesion and pressure release often overruled strict doctrine. Barn dances were tolerated, sometimes grudgingly sanctioned by the elders, precisely because they provided a vital outlet. They reinforced community bonds, offered a rare opportunity for sanctioned interaction between young people, crucial for marriage prospects, and served as a collective exhale after seasons of unrelenting stress and danger. However, they were far from free-for-alls. Historians still argue whether these events genuinely functioned as safe pressure valves that strengthened social fabric, or if they were inherently volatile powder kegs where suppressed desires and frustrations inevitably bubbled over into conflict, scandal, or worse, despite the watchful eyes. Did the structure contain the chaos, or merely channel it? Now, the quirky, slightly transactional tidbit, the dance token economy. Entry wasn't free. Forget cover charges. Men were often expected to contribute to the festivities, a jug of hard cider, a sack of apples, or most commonly, fish. A fat cod or a brace of mackerel could serve as your admission ticket. But the real currency emerged inside. While group dances like reels and squares were the norm, there might be rare moments, a slower tune, a pause between sets, where a more daring couple might attempt a brief turn together. This required negotiation. A young man couldn't just ask. He needed leverage. Enter the dance token. This could be a particularly fine whittled peg, a smooth, interesting stone found on the beach, a small, sweet winter apple saved for this occasion, or even a chunk of precious maple sugar. He'd approach her, not directly, but perhaps through a sister or a less intimidating friend. The token was presented, "For your trouble." If she accepted it, tucking it quickly into her apron pocket, it meant she was willing to grant him one dance when the opportunity arose. Rejection. A polite shake of the head, the token left untouched. It was a tiny, tangible contract, a promise of potential contact purchased with practical goods or crafted skill. Possessing a dance token felt like holding a lottery ticket for a moment of near bliss. Feel the tension crackle. You're swept into a reel. Lines form, partners face each other. The fiddle screeches, the caller's voice booms commands. Swing your partner. The command hits like lightning. You step forward. Your hands find theirs. One hand clasping theirs, the other resting tentatively, oh so tentatively, on their waist. Through layers of wool and linen, you feel the solid warmth of them. Your eyes lock. The barn, the noise, the watching eyes, blur. For 3, maybe 4 seconds, you are connected. Spinning. The rough fabric of their sleeve under your fingers, the pressure of their hand on your waist, it's more intimate than anything you've experienced in months. Then, promenade, and the connection breaks, leaving your skin tingling where they touched you. You move down the line, dizzy, breathless, hyper-aware of their presence just a few bodies away. Later, during a slower, statelier contradance, you might find yourself walking side by side down the line, arms linked. It's formal, prescribed, but your forearm is pressed against theirs for the length of the barn. Every step, every shift in balance, transmits through that contact. You don't speak. You barely breathe. The entire universe narrows to the electric inches where your bodies connect through cloth. You store the sensation like a squirrel hoarding nuts for winter. The watchfulness never ceases. Matrons line the walls, eyes sharp as gimlets, missing no lingering hand, no glance held a beat too long. Fathers cluster near the cider, their laughter a little too loud, their observations about the dancers pointed. The fiddler controls the pace, the caller dictates the moves, the community polices the boundaries. A dance that gets too wild, a couple spinning too close for too long, draws immediate censoring glares or a sharp word from the elders. Yet, within those rigid confines, the sheer physicality is overwhelming. The press of bodies in the crowded space, the accidental brushes as you squeeze past, the shared breath in the warm air, the intoxicating rhythm thrumming through your feet, it's a sensory bombardment after the sensory deprivation of village life. For a few precious hours, the relentless grind fades. You are not just a gutting machine or a net hauler. You are body moving, connecting, feeling. That single, sanctioned hand clasp, that brief arm link, becomes the emotional pinnacle of your year, a memory to be replayed endlessly on cold nights back in the crowded cottage, a promise of contact that must sustain you until the next rare, perilous gathering. The barn dance isn't freedom. It's a meticulously choreographed glimpse of it, a fleeting permission to touch, vibrating with the desperate energy of lives starved for connection, all set to the frantic, joyful, deeply serious scrape of a fiddle playing against the howl of the Atlantic wind just outside the thin wooden walls. Section 11. The barn dance's frantic energy fades, leaving behind a dull ache in your feet and the phantom warmth of a hand clasp lingering on your skin. But the village doesn't run on fiddle tunes. It runs on cod, salt, and gossip. And the epic enter of that vital third commodity, not the meeting house, not the wharf, but the cramped, cluttered, perpetually dim cave of the general store. Forget social media. This is where reputations are minted, traded, and occasionally shattered, all over the counter while someone buys a pound of nails or a twist of cheap tobacco. If the barn dance was a fleeting glimpse of heaven, the store is the daily grind of purgatory, where every transaction carries the weight of public scrutiny. Date night here isn't candlelit. It's lit by the greasy glow of a single whale oil lamp, and it involves navigating a minefield of whispers disguised as pleasantries. You push open the heavy, salt-swollen door, a bell jangling overhead like a nervous tick. The smell hits you first, a thick, layered fog of brine-soaked wood, dried herbs hanging from the beams, kerosene, pickling spices, musty burlap sacks, cheap tallow candles, and the ever-present, faintly sweet reek of molasses slowly leaking from a barrel in the corner. Light struggles through grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the thick air. Shelves groan under a chaotic jumble of necessities, bolts of coarse calico, coils of tarred rope, sacks of flour and cornmeal, barrels of salt, tins of dubious meat, jars of murky preserves, stacks of tin plates, and tools like hammers and awls hanging from hooks. Behind the scarred wooden counter, perched like a spider at the center of its web, sits Mr. Henderson, or whoever runs this particular mercantile outpost. He sees everything. He hears everything. And he rarely forgets. You need lamp oil. Or maybe a new fish hook. Or just a moment's respite from the wind. But entering the store isn't a simple errand. It's stepping onto a stage. Other villagers are always present. Old men warming themselves by the pot-bellied stove, swapping tales that grow taller with each telling. Women comparing the quality of salt or the price of thread, their eyes sharp. Young people, like yourself, trying to look nonchalant while desperately hoping they might walk in. Every interaction is observed, parsed, and filed away for later dissemination. Buying a larger-than-usual bag of sugar, clearly signaling preparations for a wedding feast. Hesitating over a bolt of finer-than-normal wool, must be making courting clothes. Asking discreetly about the price of a small cooking pot, obvious plans to set up your own hearth. Mr. Henderson's raised eyebrow as he weighs your purchase is a silent commentary. Here's the mainstream historical fact underpinning this pressure cooker. The general store was often the only commercial hub for miles, serving as post office, news exchange, bank, extending precarious credit, and vital supply line. Its proprietor wielded immense social power. He knew who was in debt, who had a good season, who bought laudanum suspiciously often, and who lingered near the ribbon display. Information wasn't just currency, it was survival. Knowing the price of salt before bartering your catch, hearing about a storm wrecking a boat further down the coast, learning which family might be hiring for shore work, all flowed through this cramped space. Historians still argue whether this centralized information hub fostered a vital sense of community interdependence and shared knowledge, or if it primarily functioned as an engine of social control, where the proprietor and the most vocal gossips could ruin lives with a well-placed whisper or the denial of essential credit. Was it a lifeline or a leash? Now, the quirky, acoustically bizarre tidbit, the whalebone gossip conduit. The store's structure often included massive, ancient whale jawbones arching overhead as beams, salvaged from long-dead leviathans. These bones, dense and strangely resonant, acted like accidental telegraph wires. Sound traveled along them with uncanny clarity. If you were standing near the molasses barrel directly under one end of a jawbone arch, and Mrs. Gable was gossiping fiercely near the pickled crocks at the other end, her hissed commentary about young Eli Carter spending far too long examining that new bonnet pattern yesterday, mark my words, he's smitten with Martha Peabody and her father won't stand for it, could carry, faint but distinct, right to your ears. Conversely, your murmured question to the storekeeper about the cost of a wedding ring, intended to be private, might resonate along the bone, broadcasting your intentions to the old men by the stove. It was an unpredictable, uncontrollable amplification system. Whispers intended for one person could become public announcements, while loud conversations near the stove might be muffled. Villagers learned to use it, sometimes deliberately murmuring sensitive things near the bone hoping it would carry to specific ears, other times avoiding those spots like the plague. The whale, dead decades ago, still carried the village's secrets in its skeleton. Navigating the store requires diplomatic skill worthy of a Tudor courtier. You see them enter. Your pulse quickens. You pretend intense interest in a display of rusty fish hooks. They head for the thread counter. How to interact? A direct approach is suicide. You catch their eye, offer the smallest, briefest nod, the store nod, universally understood as "I see you, but we are observed." Maybe, if the stars align and Mrs. Dobbs is momentarily distracted haggling over salt cod prices, you can drift towards the same aisle. "Fine weather we're having," you murmur, staring fixedly at a barrel of pickled herring. "Bracing," they reply, examining a coil of rope with undue fascination. The banal words are meaningless. The shared tension, the awareness of the listening walls and whalebones, the sheer effort of this covert proximity, that's the communication. A dropped spool of thread, rolling toward your feet, becomes a minor epic. You bend to retrieve it. Your hands brush as you return it. A spark in the gloom. "Thank you," they say, a fraction softer than necessary. Mr. Henderson clears his throat pointedly from behind the counter. The moment shatters. You retreat to the salt sacks, heart pounding, the the brief contact burning brighter than the barn dance clasp. You've exchanged nothing of substance, yet everything hangs in the air, thick as the store's smell, noted by the old men, filed away by Mrs. Gable, and possibly already vibrating along the ancient whalebone overhead, destined to be dissected over suppers throughout the cove. The store isn't just where you buy nails. It's where your private hopes are weighed, measured, and often found wanting by the court of public opinion, all under the watchful eye of a shopkeeper who knows the price of everything, including your silence. Section 12. That shared glance in the store, the brief warmth of a dance clasp, they feel like fragile promises whispered against the wind. But in gloomy harbor, promises need backing. Hard backing. Forget diamond rings or dream honeymoons. Here, marriage isn't sealed with a kiss. It's negotiated like the price of mackerel at the wharf, with assets laid bare like gutted fish on the flakes. Romance takes a backseat to ledgers, barrels, and the cold calculus of survival. Date night morphs into a tense summit between fathers, where your future happiness is weighed against a share in a leaky dory or the milk yield of a scrawny cow. The air in the cramped cottage parlor hangs thick, smelling of damp wool, wood smoke, and unspoken tension. You perch on the edge of the least rickety stool, trying to disappear into the shadows. Opposite you, perched with equal discomfort, is them. Your fathers sit facing each other, weathered faces impassive, hands calloused and clasped. Your mother and theirs hover near the hearth, faces carefully neutral, but their eyes miss nothing. This isn't a celebration. It's a board meeting for a perilous joint venture. The suitor's father clears his throat, a sound like gravel shifting. Fine season the gull had, he offers, a seemingly casual opener. Translation: my son is part of a profitable operation. Your father nods slowly, eyes fixed on the worn tabletop. Aye. Though the sea sprite lost 2 nets in the last blow. Counterpoint: fishing is risky, your asset is volatile. The dance begins. It's not about love. It's about viability. Can the young man support a wife? More crucially, can he support the children that will follow? His father lists assets, his son's share in the gull, partial but significant, the sturdy dory he built himself, the tools he owns, perhaps a small plot of rocky land unsuitable for much but grazing a goat. His reputation as a steady hand, not prone to drink or rash decisions, is emphasized, a crucial intangible asset. Then, the gaze shifts. What does the bride bring? Your father speaks of your skills, masterful salting technique that minimizes waste, renowned net mending speed and strength, a strong back for hauling water and wood, a reputation for thrift and capable management of a household. He might mention the loom in the corner, implying your skill at producing cloth. But crucially, he outlines the dowry. This isn't a gift. It's the bride's family's investment in the new household survival. It might be barrels, precious, salt-stained barrels essential for the catch. It might be rights to a specific, productive lobster pot location. It could be a milk cow, or a breeding ewe. Sometimes, it's a small sum of hard-saved coin, or even a promise of future labor. Your younger brother working on the groom's boat for a season. The dowry bridges the gap between the groom's earning potential and the immediate costs of setting up a new, separate hearth. Here's the mainstream historical fact that stripped romance bare. Marriage was fundamentally an economic transfer of assets and labor, negotiated by families to ensure the new unit's survival. The dowry wasn't optional. It was essential capital. It compensated the groom's family for taking on the responsibility of another mouth to feed and future children, and provided the new couple with vital startup resources. In a cash-poor economy, goods, labor, and resource rights were currency. A young woman without a decent dowry, no matter how skilled or beloved, faced severely limited prospects, often condemned to lifelong dependence as a spinster aunt or low-paid domestic in another household. Historians still argue whether this system, by formalizing the woman's contribution as tangible capital, offered her a measure of security and respect within the marital partnership, or if it reduced her to chattel, her value measured solely in barrels and livestock, her feelings irrelevant in the face of familial bargaining. Was it brutal pragmatism or institutionalized commodification? Now, the quirky, pressure-laden tidbit, the ghost dowry. This wasn't a supernatural event, but a potent social shadow. Sometimes, a family, particularly if they'd recently suffered a loss at sea or a poor season, simply couldn't muster the expected dowry. A cow died, barrels were lost in a storm, the promised lobster ground proved barren. But the match might be desirable, or the young couple fiercely determined. The solution: an IOU dowry. A solemn promise, often formally witnessed by the storekeeper or even the preacher, that the outstanding dowry, 2 barrels, the rights to the West Cove pots, the next ewe lamb, would be delivered once circumstances allowed. This ghost dowry hung over the new marriage like a debt. The bride entered her new home under a cloud of obligation, her family's honor, and her own standing within the marriage, contingent on future delivery. It created tension, not just between the families, but within the couple. Every setback, a poor catch, a sick animal, was amplified by the specter of the unpaid dowry. Conversely, finally delivering that last barrel or securing the lobster rights felt like lifting a physical weight, a delayed validation of the marriage pact itself. The ghost had been laid to rest. Feel the weight in the room. Your father mentions the 2 barrels of best quality salt he'll contribute. Their father nods, seemingly satisfied, but then adds, and the use of the skiff for the smelt run next spring. A new demand. Your father's jaw tightens. The skiff is vital for nearshore fishing. Giving up its use, even seasonally, is a significant concession. The negotiation inches forward, haggling over resources as if your future happiness were cod fillets. You steal a glance at them. Their eyes meet yours, wide with shared anxiety. There's love there, perhaps, or at least deep affection and shared hope, but it feels dwarfed by the talk of barrels and boat shares. Your worth, your ability to build a life together, is being reduced to the milk yield of a cow and the seaworthiness of a dory. The warmth of the hearth doesn't reach you. You feel chilled to the bone. A joke is made about the weather, breaking the tension momentarily, but it rings hollow. The laughter is strained. When an agreement is finally reached, the salt barrels, limited skiff rights, and your mother's best copper pot thrown in, there's relief, but it's the relief of surviving a storm, not the joy of celebration. Hands are shaken, not clasped. Your future is settled, not celebrated. The dowry isn't a gift. It's the price of admission to a shared struggle, paid not in gold, but in salt, sweat, and the promise of endless toil. As you leave the parlor, the scent of wood smoke replaced by the salt tang from the harbor, you understand date night in this context was a high-stakes auction, where hearts were secondary to hardware, and the most profound commitment wasn't "I do," but "we can provide," barely. Section 13. The dowry barrels are settled. The handshake between fathers still echoes in the damp parlor air, a contract sealed in salt and necessity. Relief, thin and brittle, might flutter for a moment. But in gloomy harbor, sealing the deal isn't the end of the peril. It's just shifting the danger. Forget picking a date based on astrological charts or venue availability. Here, the universe itself seems to hold a veto. A tangled net isn't just bad luck, it's a screaming portent. A bird flying the wrong way isn't just wildlife, it's a divine edict scrawled across the grey sky. Superstition isn't quaint folklore here, it's the operating system for navigating a capricious, deadly world. And when it comes to setting the wedding date, logic and longing bow to the whispers of omens. Date night becomes a tense consultation with unseen forces, where the flutter of a gull's wing can derail your future. You wake on a morning that feels right. The cod run was strong, the dowry delivered, or its ghost acknowledged. The first fragile blooms of wild roses appear on the headland path. Hope, tentative but bright, sparks. Today, you think. Today, we ask the preacher. You pull on your least patched shirt, smooth your hair with water from the bucket. But as you step out, the sight hits you like a douse of icy seawater. Old Man Pike, down on the wharf, wrestling with a net. Not just any net. His net. The new one, painstakingly mended and tarred. And it's a horrific, slimy bird's nest of tangled line, snarled beyond easy repair. He curses, a low, guttural sound that carries on the still air. Your blood runs cold. A tangled net, especially a new one, especially on the morning you plan to set the date. It's not an inconvenience. It's a blazing neon sign screaming bad omen. The universe, or the sea, or the fickle spirits of drowned fishermen, are shouting no. Doubt, cold and heavy, settles in your gut. The hopeful spark sputters and dies. The walk to the preacher's cottage feels like a trudge through wet sand. Here's the mainstream historical fact grounding this pervasive dread. Fishing communities worldwide are notoriously superstitious, and 19th century New England villages were no exception. Life was governed by forces utterly beyond human control. The weather, the capricious migration of fish, the ever-present threat of sudden death at sea. In the absence of scientific understanding, people sought patterns, signs, any way to predict the unpredictable and appease the seemingly malicious whims of fate. Omens weren't ignored. They were vital data points in the perilous calculus of survival. Ignoring a clear sign was inviting disaster, not just for yourself, but potentially for your boat, your family, the whole village. Historians still argue whether this complex web of superstition genuinely provided psychological comfort and a sense of agency, or if it primarily fostered paralyzing anxiety and irrational decision-making that could compound the very hardships it sought to avoid. Did the rituals offer control, or just the illusion of it? Now, the quirky, feather-based tidbit, the albatross veto. While gulls were common, the rare sighting of an albatross, those vast, majestic wanderers of the open ocean, held immense, contradictory power. Seeing one soaring effortlessly alongside a boat far out could be an incredibly good omen, a sign of protection and fair winds. But seeing one ashore, especially near the village, or worse, landed on a roof or boat deck, that was catastrophic. It screamed shipwreck, doom, or a curse of epic proportions. An albatross near shore was an absolute, non-negotiable veto on any major undertaking, especially a wedding. If one was spotted within a week of a planned date, the ceremony was postponed immediately. No questions asked, no arguments entertained. The albatross wasn't just a bird. It was a bone-white messenger from the realm of drowned sailors. Its presence on land was an unholy trespass, a dire warning etched in feathers and silence. Villagers would avoid even looking directly at it, whispering prayers and making warding signs until it took flight back towards the desolate grey horizon. Imagine the crushing weight of it. You've navigated the chaperones, the dowry haggling, the relentless work. You finally see a clear patch on the horizon of your life. You dare to dream of a tiny cottage, just the two of you, away from the crowded hearth. You tentatively suggest a date after the next full moon. Then, 3 days before, Widow Jensen spots a lone magpie perched on the meeting house weathervane. One for sorrow. Her pronouncement ripples through the cove. Doubts whisper, "Is it your sorrow?" Then, young Billy Tar trips and spills a whole bucket of bait eels right at your doorstep. Slippery, wriggling chaos at your threshold. Another terrible sign. The whispers grow louder. "Perhaps not next week," your mother murmurs, her eyes anxious. The signs aren't auspicious. Your intended's father might gruffly mention a dream he had about storm waves crashing over the wharf. The collective anxiety becomes a tangible force. Postponement feels inevitable, a surrender to the unseen jury of omens. Setting a date becomes less about desire and more about divination. You scan the skies, the sea state, the behavior of animals, the condition of tools. A smooth haul sets heart soaring, a ripped sail casts a pall. The flight path of geese migrating overhead is analyzed like tea leaves. A fox seen near the graveyard? Definitely postpone. A double-yolked egg? Maybe proceed. Cautiously. The pressure is immense. You crave the simple act of being together, officially. But the fear is primal. What if the tangled net was about your marriage? What if forcing it brings a storm that sinks his boat? What if the albatross was a warning specifically for you? Love battles dread. Logic, what little exists here, argues that nets tangle, birds land, eggs have double yolks sometimes. But the ingrained terror of provoking the sea's wrath, of inviting the malicious attention of fate, is overwhelming. Postponing feels like buying insurance against disaster, even if the premium is your own fragile happiness. So, you wait. You watch. You interpret the rustle of leaves, the pattern of seaweed on the tide line, the way the gulls cry. Date night becomes a vigil for cosmic permission, a frustrating dance with the fickle gods of wind, wave, and wildlife, where the most profound commitment is tested not by doubt of each other, but by the terrifying uncertainty of an indifferent ocean and the ominous whispers of a world saturated with signs. The path to the altar isn't paved with rose petals. It's littered with the potential landmines of spilled eels, tangled twine, and the bone-white shadow of an albatross that shouldn't be there, forcing you to choose, again and again, between the desperate pull of your heart and the paralyzing fear of inviting doom. Section 14. The omens finally relent. The tangled net was blamed on Old Man Pike's clumsiness, the albatross was merely resting, and the double-yolked egg sealed it. The day arrives, not draped in sunshine, but shrouded in the village's customary damp mist. The ceremony in the meeting house is brief, stark, devoid of flowers or fanfare. The preacher's words about love and obedience echo in the near-empty space. Most of the village is gutting fish or mending gear. You clasp hands, rough skin against rough skin. A simple band, perhaps carved from whalebone or a copper coin hammered smooth, is exchanged. It feels less like a symbol of love and more like the final rivet in a practical partnership contract. I do echoes, but the real vow feels like we will endure. Then, it's done. Congratulations are muttered, hands shaken quickly. No rice, no cheers. Just the sigh of the wind outside and the weight of expectation settling onto your shoulders. You walk not into sunset bliss, but into the cramped, smoky reality of his family's saltbox cottage. Forget rose petals on the bed. Forget privacy. Forget your bed. The honeymoon suite is a corner of the communal room, screened by a threadbare curtain that smells faintly of fish oil and mildew. Date night is officially over. Welcome to the relentless, unprivate grind of merged survival. You step over the threshold, the simple band heavy on your finger. His family, parents, younger siblings, perhaps a widowed aunt, offer nods, not smiles. Your trunk, containing your meager possessions and dowry items, those precious barrels are already stored in the shed, is shoved into the corner near the woodpile. The air is thick with the familiar fug of simmering stew, wet wool, wood smoke, and too many bodies in too small a space. The hearth fire crackles, the only source of light and heat as dusk deepens the gloom outside. You are not a bride. You are a new piece of essential, slightly disruptive, machinery added to the household engine. Your mother-in-law's eyes assess you as she stirs the pot, calculating your efficiency. His father grunts a welcome, already turning back to whittling a new net needle. The younger siblings stare, curious and wary. Supper is a silent affair, eaten hunched on stools around the central table. Bowls of fish stew, chunks of hard bread. Conversation is sparse, functional. Pass the salt. Wind's picking up. Need more wood split tomorrow. You eat, the stew tasting like ashes. Afterwards, chores resume. You wash dishes in a basin of tepid water, conscious of every move being watched. He helps his father check fishing lines by the dim lamplight. The rhythm of the household continues, unchanged by your arrival. You are absorbed, not celebrated. The sheer lack of transition is jarring. One moment, you are Martha Peabody. The next, you are Eli Carter's wife, expected to seamlessly integrate into the Carter survival machine. Here's the mainstream historical fact that shatters any illusion of newlywed privacy. Multi-generational households were the absolute norm, not the exception. Space was scarce, resources scarcer. Building a new cottage required capital, time, and land, luxuries few young couples possessed. Moving straight into the groom's family home was standard practice, often for years, sometimes indefinitely. This meant sharing the single main room for cooking, eating, working, and sleeping. Privacy was a fantasy. Newlyweds typically slept in the same room as siblings, parents, or other relatives, sometimes separated only by a flimsy curtain or a strategically placed clothes horse. The concept of a bridal chamber was as alien as a tropical beach. Historians still argue whether this enforced closeness fostered strong, supportive extended families where childcare and labor were shared, or if it bred constant tension, resentment, and suffocated the development of the new couple's bond under the weight of parental oversight and lack of intimacy. Did it build community or bury individuality? The quirky, deeply unromantic tidbit. The snores and shuffles code. With zero privacy and multiple people sleeping within arm's reach, intimacy wasn't just difficult. It was a high-risk operation requiring stealth and silent communication. Couples developed intricate, non-verbal codes using the ambient night sounds as cover. A specific pattern of coughs might signal coast is clear now. A deliberate shuffle under the shared blankets, timed with a particularly loud snore from Pa in the opposite corner, could convey urgency. A gentle, rhythmic tap on the mattress frame, masked by the wind rattling the shutters, might mean wait until Aunt Maud starts her whistling snore. It was less lovemaking and more espionage, a furtive connection conducted in the pitch dark, hearts pounding not just with passion but with the terror of being overheard. Success relied on the deep, predictable rhythms of the household sleepers and absolute silence. A creaking floorboard could spell disaster, leading to awkward mornings thick with unspoken accusations and the crushing weight of communal disapproval. The wedding night wasn't a celebration. It was the first, nerve-wracking mission in an ongoing campaign for fleeting moments of connection within the shared barracks. The curtain offers no sanctuary. Behind it, your marriage bed is likely just a straw-tick mattress on the floor, wedged between a storage chest and the wall. You undress hastily in the dark, shivering, pulling on a coarse nightshirt. He does the same. You lie down, the straw prickling through the thin sheet. The curtain might as well be lace for all the privacy it provides. You hear every rustle, every sigh, every grunt from the other sleepers mere feet away. His mother's rhythmic breathing. His youngest brother muttering in his sleep. The scuttle of a mouse in the corner. The sheer, oppressive awareness of listeners stifles any whispered word, any tender gesture. You lie rigid, side by side, staring into the absolute blackness, the weight of the day, the ceremony, the scrutiny, the crushing lack of solitude, pressing down. The warmth of his body beside you is both a comfort and a source of unbearable frustration. The promise of the barn dance, the coded herbs, the shared hymnal page, it all collides with the gritty reality of this shared pallet in a room full of his family. Love, in this context, isn't candlelit whispers. It's the shared, silent endurance of profound awkwardness and the desperate, furtive hope for a moment when the snores align perfectly, and the wind howls loud enough to cover the tiny, necessary sounds of two people trying, against all odds, to connect in the only way left to them, surrounded by the sleeping, unknowing audience of their new life. The wedding band feels tight. The cottage feels smaller than ever. The vast, indifferent sea outside seems less confining than the four walls of this single, crowded, watchful room. Happily Ever After begins with a shared sigh lost in the chorus of other people's sleep. Section 15. The thin curtain rustles, barely muffling the pre-dawn sounds. The scrape of a stool, the low murmur of his father's voice, the metallic clink of hooks being checked. You lie rigid, eyes open in the thick dark, the rough wool blanket scratchy against your chin. Beside you, the straw-tick mattress sighs as he shifts, rising. No lingering warmth, no whispered farewell. This isn't a goodbye. It's a deployment. The gull sails with the tide, chasing the capricious cod banks further offshore, into the vast, grey moor of the Atlantic. He dresses quickly, efficiently, pulling on layers of wool and oilskin against the bone-deep chill of the open ocean. You hear the soft thud of his sea bag hitting the floor, packed yesterday with hardtack, dried fish, spare socks, and the small whalebone letter opener you whittled for him, a useless luxury he carries like a talisman. He pauses by the curtain. You feel it. A hand, heavy and calloused, rests for a single heartbeat on your shoulder through the blanket. No words. Just pressure. Then it's gone. The cottage door opens, a sliver of pre-dawn grey slicing the gloom, then shuts with a soft thud. Silence crashes back, louder than the wind. He's gone. For weeks. Maybe months. Date night evaporates, replaced by the hollow echo of absence and the relentless tick of worry. You rise when the household stirs, the air already thick with the smell of wood smoke and simmering porridge. His empty stool by the table is a physical ache. His mother's eyes meet yours across the hearth, a shared, bleak understanding, devoid of sentiment. The weight descends instantly. His chores are now yours. Hauling water feels heavier. Chopping wood requires more swings. Checking his lobster pots, once a shared task, is now a solitary trudge along the slippery rocks, the wind biting with renewed malice. The village carries on, but your world has fractured. Every creak of the cottage, every distant shout from the wharf, every change in the wind's pitch sends your heart lurching. Is it a boat returning? Or just the sea flexing its muscles? The constant background hum of anxiety, present even when he was home, amplifies into a shriek. You scan the horizon relentlessly, a habit as ingrained as breathing, searching for the familiar cut of the gull's sail against the endless grey. Here's the mainstream historical fact that defines this agonizing separation. Fishing voyages, especially for cod on the Grand Banks or other distant grounds, could last anywhere from several weeks to several months, depending on the target species, weather, and luck filling the hold. Boats were small, often smacks or schooners, vulnerable to the ferocious North Atlantic storms. Communication was non-existent. Once a boat sailed beyond the horizon, it vanished from the world of the living until it reappeared, or didn't. Wives became instant heads of household, managing finances, often precariously balanced on credit from the storekeeper, defending property, making crucial decisions about supplies and repairs, all while shouldering their own grueling workload and the crushing uncertainty. Historians still argue whether this enforced independence fostered a unique resilience and capability in the women left behind, forging a powerful matriarchal undercurrent in these communities, or if the constant, gnawing stress and lack of support simply broke spirits and eroded health, leaving women perpetually exhausted and emotionally scarred. Was it empowerment through necessity, or slow-motion devastation? The quirky, heart-breakingly practical tidbit, the hope chest inventory. During the long absences, women often performed a grim, meticulous ritual. They would open their dowry chest or a special box containing their most precious items, the wedding band, if not worn constantly for work, that whittled button, the pressed lavender, maybe a lock of his hair tied with thread, the letters he painstakingly wrote during brief shore leaves, salt-stained, ink-blurred, cherished. They wouldn't just look at them. They would inventory them. Touch each item, remember its origin, assess its condition. It wasn't just reminiscence, it was preparation. If the boat didn't return, if he was swallowed by the grey waves, these items wouldn't just be mementos. They would become vital evidence of the marriage, of her status as his widow, crucial for securing any widow's benefits, meager as they were, retaining rights to his boat share or fishing gear against claims from his family, or proving her claim to the meager possessions in their shared corner. Handling the whalebone letter opener wasn't just longing. It was a silent rehearsal for potential loss, a way to fortify herself against the unthinkable by confronting it, piece by tangible piece, in the quiet gloom of the cottage while the wind howled outside. The hope chest doubled as an actuarial file. Imagine the rhythm of your days. Mending nets alone on the wharf, the rough twine scraping your knuckles, your eyes constantly drawn to the empty horizon. Sitting in the meeting house on Sunday, the hymns about God's mercy tasting like ash, your gaze fixed not on the preacher but on the families with husbands present, feeling a sharp pang of envy mixed with dread. Eating supper with his family, the conversation stilted, the empty space at the table a silent, crushing presence. Nights are the worst. Behind the thin curtain, the bed is vast and cold. Every groan of the cottage timbers, every rat scuttle in the walls, sounds like a footstep, a sign of his return, or worse, a premonition of bad news. You clutch the blanket, straining to hear the distinct sound of the gull's bellbuoy clanging in the harbour, a sound that hasn't come. The loneliness isn't a soft sadness. It's a physical void, a constant companion as demanding as hunger. You manage the household, you work, you endure, but a part of you is perpetually at sea, tossed on those invisible, terrifying waves, scanning for a sail that might never reappear. Romance isn't candlelit dinners. It's the fervent, desperate hope that the man whose face you struggle to recall with perfect clarity after weeks apart will walk back through that door, smelling of salt and fish, whole and alive. A good haul means security. His return means survival. Date night is the agonizing vigil on the headland, the frantic deciphering of every sail shape on the horizon, the crushing relief when it is the gull, and the silent, shared inventory of the hope chest items that, for now, remain just tokens of love, not relics of grief. The vast, indifferent sea doesn't steal kisses. It steals time, peace, and the simple, terrifying certainty that the one you pledged your endurance to will endure himself. Section 16. The weight in your apron pocket isn't just coins. It's the crushing responsibility of keeping the entire Carter engine running while its captain is lost somewhere on the grey, heaving map of the Atlantic. Forget managing a joint checking account. You're juggling survival on a knife edge of credit, barter, and sheer, stubborn will. His absence isn't just an emotional void. It's a gaping hole in the household's labor force and its economic lifeline. The storekeeper's ledger, that thick, greasy book smelling of tobacco and fish, becomes your Bible, your tormentor, your constant companion. Date night transforms into a grim tango with Henderson over the price of salt, the interest on last month's flour, and the terrifyingly fragile column of numbers that separates your household from ruin. You walk to the store, the familiar jingle of the bell overhead sounding like an alarm. Henderson looks up, his spectacles perched on his nose, his expression unreadable. "You don't need fish hooks today. You need time." "Mr. Henderson," you begin, your voice carefully steady, belying the tremor in your hands buried deep in your pockets. "Regarding the account." You outline the situation. Eli's share from the last partial haul before he left is already spent on essential repairs to the dory. The salted cod you contributed to the family barrel is dwindling. Winter is a grey smudge on the horizon. You need flour. You need lamp oil. You need nails to fix the leaking shed roof before the autumn gales hit. You need credit. You present your calculations, your voice low but firm, detailing the expected value of Eli's share upon the goal's return. If it returns, if the catch is good, if the prices hold. It's a house of cards built on salt spray and hope. Henderson listens, his finger tracing a column in his ledger. He knows Eli's reputation, the gull's recent luck, your own standing for thrift and hard work. But he also knows the sea's fickleness. The pause stretches, thick with the smell of pickles and impending judgment. Finally, he nods, grudgingly. A sack of flour, half a gallon of oil. Nails, we'll see. It's not generosity. It's a cold calculation of risk and reputation. You sign the ledger, your name a shaky scrawl beside the growing debt. The weight in your pocket lightens slightly, replaced by the heavier weight of obligation. Here's the mainstream historical fact that forced women into this financial frontline. With men absent for months at sea, women became the de facto heads of household, managing complex family finances often built on precarious credit systems. They negotiated with merchants like Henderson, settled debts using their husbands' anticipated shares, a system fraught with risk, bartered goods and labor, managed meager savings, and made critical spending decisions impacting the entire family's survival through winter. This required financial literacy, negotiation skills, and an iron nerve, often learned through harsh necessity rather than formal education. Their reputation for honesty and capability was their most valuable asset. Historians still argue whether this necessity thrust upon them fostered a unique sense of female agency and economic acumen within the constraints of a patriarchal society, or if it simply added another layer of crushing stress and potential blame if things went wrong, trapping them in a cycle of anxiety and dependence on male earnings ultimately controlled by the sea. Was it empowerment by default, or exploitation by circumstance? The quirky, heart-breakingly pragmatic tidbit, the grief ledger. This wasn't an official document, but a mental or sometimes whispered tally kept by the women, particularly the older ones and widows. It tracked not money, but loss. Each storm season, each known departure, added names to this invisible register. They noted which boats were overdue, which husbands were on particularly perilous runs, which widows were newly added to their ranks. It informed their bartering. They might offer Widow Pike an extra skein of wool or help mending her fence, not just from kindness, but as a silent investment in the communal safety net they all relied upon. They knew her inclusion in the grief ledger meant her credit with Henderson was shot, her labor capacity reduced by grief. Helping her was a down payment against the day their own name might be added. They also tracked patterns. Was it the northeast runs in late October that seemed cursed? Did boats skippered by young, overconfident men fare worse? This grief ledger was a shared, unspoken actuarial table, a way to map the contours of collective loss and anticipate where the next blow might fall. It was knowledge born of salt and sorrow, used to navigate the treacherous waters of mutual aid and shared vulnerability. Seeing Widow Pike carefully counting buttons in her jar, another form of currency, wasn't just poverty. It was a woman reconciling her own entry in the village's invisible ledger of sorrow. Feel the pressure. You haggle with Old Man Tar over the price of mending his nets, needing the coin but knowing his reputation for underpaying. You trade 3 jars of your best preserved beach plums, a luxury you denied your own family, to Mrs. Gable for wool to knit winter socks, because Eli's are worn through. You calculate every ounce of salt used on the fish you managed to catch near shore, knowing its value. You lie awake behind the curtain, not just missing Eli's warmth, but mentally auditing the household. the remaining flour, the oil level in the lamp, the state of the roof, the mounting figures in Henderson's book. A sudden squall rattles the shutters. Is it hitting the gull? If the boat is lost, the debt remains. You remain responsible. Henderson's grudging credit will vanish. The hope chest items become potential barter goods, not mementos. The grief ledger beckons. Your value, painstakingly built through years of visible toil and invisible calculation, hangs by a thread woven from seaweed and hope. You become a master of invisible labor. The physical work, hauling, mending, preserving, is grueling, but visible. The mental labor, the constant calculations, the negotiations, the risk assessments, the suppression of terror into practical action, is the true burden. It's conducted in the quiet moments, while stirring the pot, while walking to the well, while sitting rigid in the meeting house. It's the arithmetic of despair transformed into the daily act of endurance. Date night is the silent, relentless battle fought with ledgers and lintels, salted fish and whispered pleas to a storekeeper, where the most profound commitment isn't whispered endearments, but the daily, grinding act of keeping the home fires burning and the creditors at bay, alone against the tide, while the man you pledged your life to battles the actual tide, far beyond the horizon, his fate dictating yours. The apron pocket holds the fragile economy of your survival, and its weight never lightens, only shifts from coins to fear to the crushing relief when the gull's sails finally, blessedly, appear, bringing not just a husband, but a temporary reprieve from the precipice. Section 17. The gull is overdue. Again. The horizon remains stubbornly empty, a vast, unbroken sheet of lead-grey indifference. Henderson's ledger feels heavier each day, the numbers blurring into a silent accusation. The wind winds through the chinks in the clapboard, carrying the damp chill that seeps into your bones, deeper than the fire can reach. It's a cold that isn't just physical. It's the chill of waiting, of worry, of the relentless grind wearing you down to the nub. Tonight, the crowded cottage feels less like shelter and more like a cage amplifying every sigh, every creak, every anxious thought. You need something. Not warmth, not comfort, escape. A numbness. And in gloomy harbor, there's only one place offering that particular brand of oblivion, the tavern. Forget cozy pubs. This is a dim, reeking cave of desperation, where date night curdles into a bitter communion with the bottle and the ghosts of drowned men. You push open the heavy, scarred door. The smell hits like a fist: stale rum, cheap tobacco smoke, unwashed bodies, damp wool, vomit, and the pervasive, sour tang of hopelessness. The air hangs thick and greasy, dimly lit by a few guttering tallow candles stuck in bottles on rough-hewn tables and a single, smoky oil lamp hanging behind the bar. The low roar isn't lively. It's a weary drone punctuated by hacking coughs and the occasional too loud curse. Men huddle over sticky tables, their faces gaunt in the flickering light, eyes reflecting the candle flames like dull coins. Some are young, shoulders slumped under burdens too heavy. Some are old, their faces maps of hardship etched deep, nursing their rum like it's the last drop of warmth in the world. Widow Pike sits in a shadowed corner, a rare female presence, staring into an untouched mug, her grief a tangible shroud. This isn't socializing, it's communal drowning. You find a sliver of space at the end of the bar, the wood sticky under your elbows. The barman, Silas, a mountain of a man with a nose veined like a road map, slides a chipped mug of cheap rum towards you without a word. Payment comes later, added to the tab Henderson likely already knows about. The first burning swallow is less a taste than an assault, a fiery trail down your throat that momentarily blots out the cold, the worry, the crushing weight of the ledger. The second swallow is smoother, spreading a deceptive warmth through your chest, a fog creeping into the edges of your mind. The anxious chatter about Eli, the gull, the dwindling flour sack, recedes. For a few precious minutes, the grey horizon, Henderson's judgmental spectacles, the empty space in the bed, they all blur. Rum isn't pleasure, it's chemical amnesia. It's the only vacation this village offers. Here's the mainstream historical fact fueling this bleak refuge. Alcohol consumption, particularly rum, was staggeringly high in 19th century maritime communities. It wasn't just for recreation. It was a readily available, cheap anesthetic for physical pain, from brutal labor and injuries, emotional pain, constant loss and stress, and the sheer, soul-crushing monotony of existence. Taverns like Silas's weren't just businesses. They were necessary, if destructive, pressure valves for a population living perpetually on the edge. Rum temporarily numbed the cold, dampened the fear of the sea, and offered a fleeting illusion of camaraderie amidst shared misery. Historians still argue whether these taverns served as vital, if grim, community centers offering a space for shared grief and temporary respite, or if they primarily functioned as engines of addiction and social decay, accelerating poverty, domestic violence, and the very despair they promised to alleviate. Did they bind the community in shared suffering, or unravel it sip by toxic sip? The quirky, deeply tragic tidbit, the grog proposal. In the depths of tavern despair, the rituals of courtship twisted into grotesque parodies. A man deep in his cups, his sweetheart perhaps lost to another or to the sea, might slide his last whittled creation, a peg, a button, once a token of affection, across the sticky table to a similarly despondent woman nursing her own rum. It wasn't a promise of love or partnership. It was a proposal of shared oblivion. Have another with me, the gesture implied. Let's forget together, just for tonight. Accepting the token meant accepting the next drink, sinking deeper into the shared haze. It was a pact of mutual erasure, a far cry from the hopeful herb bundles or carefully carved buttons offered in the grey light of dawn. The peg, once a symbol of patience and future utility, became currency for another round of forgetting. Sometimes, these tavern-bound pairings, fueled by rum and loneliness, led to hasty, regret-filled unions the next morning, compounding the misery. Other times, the token was left untouched on the table, a silent rejection of that particular path to the abyss. It was courtship's shadow, danced in the flickering gloom of the tavern, where the only thing promised was the temporary silencing of the howling wind inside. Feel the dangerous pull. The rum warms you, loosens the knots in your shoulders. The man next to you, reeking of fish and despair, mutters about the goal being due any day, his words slurred but carrying a hollow hope that resonates painfully. You nod, taking another sip, the fire spreading. The worries blur further. Laughter erupts from a corner table, too loud, too sharp, tinged with hysteria. A mug shatters on the floor. Silas growls a warning. The camaraderie is thin, brittle, easily shattered. A disagreement over a dice game escalates quickly, voices rising, fists clenching. The brief warmth curdles into tension. This is the flip side of the numbness, volatility. The escape offered is fragile, perched on the edge of violence or deeper despair. You watch Widow Pike finally lift her mug, her hand trembling, and drain it in one go. Her eyes meet yours for a second, empty as the harbor at low tide, before she looks away. Is that your future? Another mug appears before you. Silas raises an eyebrow. The fog beckons. The cold outside, the worry, the empty bed, they wait. The rum whispers not yet. But the cost is etched on the faces around you, in the red-veined eyes, the trembling hands, the vacant stares. Date night at the tavern isn't connection. It's shared disintegration. It's trading the sharp pain of conscious endurance for the slow, drowning ache of oblivion, all while the indifferent sea pounds the shore outside, a relentless reminder of the true master of their fates, uncaring whether they find solace in rum or ruin. The hearth fire in the cottage offered warmth and light, however shared. The tavern candle offers only flickering shadows and the promise of a deeper, more insidious chill. Section 18. The bell doesn't toll for Sunday service. It tolls with a slow, heavy, monotonous clang that seems to vibrate through the very granite bedrock of the headland. Clang, clang, clang. Each strike lands like a physical blow to your chest. You stand frozen on the path back from the well, the water bucket forgotten at your feet, icy trickles soaking your worn boots. You already know. Everyone knows. That sound isn't a call to prayer. It's the village's heart breaking. The gull isn't just overdue. It's lost. Confirmed. A smack limped into the next cove over yesterday, sails shredded, reporting wreckage matching the gull's timbers scattered across a lee shore after the last great blow. Names were shared. His name was among them. The numbness you sought in the tavern vanishes, replaced by a howling void. The rum's false warmth is a bitter memory. Reality crashes in, cold and sharp as the wind whipping off the water. Date night dreams of shared hearths dissolve into the brutal geometry of the widow's walk and the suffocating embrace of communal grief. You don't weep. Not yet. The tears are luxury buried under the immediate, crushing weight of what now? The cottage door opens. Neighbors arrive. Mrs. Gable, her face uncharacteristically soft, carries a pot of thin stew. Old man Tar silently starts chopping the woodpile higher than it's been in months. Widow Pike herself appears, her eyes holding yours with a terrible understanding. She doesn't speak. She just takes your hand, her grip surprisingly strong, cold as sea-polished stone. Her presence is a silent manifesto. Welcome to the sisterhood no one wants to join. The cottage fills with low murmurs, the clatter of dishes, the scent of donated food, charity disguised as care, necessity wrapped in awkward kindness. You are no longer Martha Carter, wife. You are Widow Carter. A new category, a new burden, a new set of expectations etched in salt and sorrow. Here's the mainstream historical fact underpinning this suffocating support. Communal support for widows and orphans wasn't just charity. It was a vital survival mechanism for the entire village. A woman left alone with children was instantly vulnerable, a potential drain on resources or, worse, a target for exploitation. The village had to step in. Practical aid poured forth: food, firewood, help with essential repairs, shared childcare. This network, woven through generations of shared loss, kept families from utter destitution. Widows often took on essential communal roles: midwifery, nursing, intricate net mending, teaching preservation skills, contributing their labor in exchange for security. The iconic Widow's Walk on coastal houses? Less about romantic vigils, historians increasingly argue, and more about functional rooftop platforms for drying fish or watching for sails. Accessible labor spaces for women now solely responsible for their household survival. Historians still argue whether this communal embrace genuinely provided solace and stability, fostering powerful female networks, or if it primarily functioned as a system of social control, binding widows to the village with obligations and surveillance, limiting their choices and constantly reminding them of their loss and dependence. Was it a safety net or a gilded cage? The quirky, deeply poignant tidbit, the Black Ribbon Code. In the immediate aftermath of a loss, the sheer volume of visitors could be overwhelming. Widows developed a silent signaling system using ribbons tied to their door latch. A single, thin black ribbon meant grieving. Please knock softly, leave essentials quietly. Two black ribbons crossed meant deep grief. No visitors today, please leave offerings at the step. A black ribbon intertwined with a faded blue or grey one, colors of the sea and sky, signaled accepting practical help only, mending, chopping, no condolences. And a rare, small white ribbon tied under the black meant, I need to speak, privately, to another who understands. This code allowed widows to manage the flood of communal attention, carving out precious moments of solitude amidst the well-meaning invasion, or silently signaling for the specific comfort only another widow could provide. The comfort that required no words, just shared presence and the profound understanding of the unique, relentless ache that never truly faded, only changed shape with the tides. A ribbon wasn't just fabric, it was a boundary drawn in silk, a plea for space in a world that demanded constant visibility. Feel the pressure beneath the casseroles. Widow Pike sits with you in the quiet hour before dusk, the only time the cottage is empty. She doesn't offer platitudes. She speaks in practicalities. Henderson's debt. Eli's share of the gull is forfeit. The boat owners will claim it against losses. Her voice is low, matter-of-fact. The dowry barrels. They're yours, clear title. Use them carefully. Barter, don't sell outright if you can. She outlines the unspoken rules. Accept the help, but don't appear too dependent. Work hard, always. Be visible at meeting house, head covered respectfully. Remarrying quickly is expected, almost demanded, especially if you're young. The village needs viable households. But choose carefully. Your value now includes property, those barrels, maybe the dory, and your proven resilience. Suitors will come, assessing your assets and your capacity for labor as much as your person. Her guidance isn't warm. It's the hard-won manual for surviving the second shipwreck, life after loss. The communal embrace that keeps you fed also holds you tightly in its grip, dictating your path forward. The stew on the hearth tastes like obligation. You walk to the headland, not to scan for sails, but to feel the wind's brutal honesty on your face. The bell has stopped tolling, but the silence is louder. The vast, indifferent sea stretches before you, the same sea that took him. The communal support is a life raft, yes, but it floats on an ocean of shared sorrow and unyielding expectation. You are not allowed to drown, but the course is charted by others. Date night is over. Romance is a memory, a pressed lavender sprig in a box. Your future is a negotiation with Henderson, a careful dance with potential suitors eyeing your barrels, a performance of grateful resilience for the village that saved you, and a lifetime of listening for a bell that will never toll for his return. The Widow's Walk isn't a lookout for love, it's a watchtower in the fortress of survival, where the view is forever colored by the grey absence on the horizon, and the only embrace is the stiff, practical one of a community that needs you functional, not shattered, even if you feel shattered inside. The black ribbon on your door sways in the salt wind, a silent flag of surrender to a new, lonelier war fought on the shores of remembrance. Section 19. The communal embrace feels less like warmth and more like a vice. The well-meaning casseroles, the watchful eyes at meeting house, the constant, low hum of expectation, it presses in, suffocating. The black ribbon on your door signals grief, but inside, a different kind of ache persists, sharp and insistent. Not just for Eli, lost to the grey waves, but for solitude. For a moment, just one, where you aren't Widow Carter, asset manager, object of pity, potential bride candidate. Where you aren't performing resilience for the village. The yearning isn't for passion, necessarily, but for the terrifying, exhilarating luxury of an unobserved breath. And sometimes, against the granite face of village propriety, a crack appears. Moonlight on wet sand. The rhythmic sigh of the tide. The forbidden gamble of a stolen hour. Date night, in its most elemental, dangerous form, becomes a furtive scramble down the shingle beach under a cloak of darkness, heart pounding louder than the surf. It starts with a look. Not across the crowded meeting house, but perhaps stacking barrels on the wharf at dusk. Him, maybe a younger son with no boat share yet, working shore crew. Or a quiet widower himself, navigating his own sea of expectation. The glance holds a fraction too long. Then, a drop tool, a gaff hook, maybe, landing near your foot with a deliberate clatter. As you both bend, fingers brushing the cold metal, a whisper, snatched by the wind but clear, low tide. Midnight. Past the black rock. No names. No guarantees. Just coordinates on a map of risk. The agreement is a shared, held breath, a spark of defiance against the watchful order of gloomy harbor. Here's the mainstream historical fact that created these fleeting opportunities. The very nature of shore-based work, checking lobster pots by moonlight, gathering bait at low tide, mending nets stretched on the beach at dawn, provided rare cover for illicit meetings. These tasks were necessary, often solitary or done in shifting pairs, and conducted during the liminal hours when the village slept or was preoccupied. The darkness and the constant roar of the sea offered a natural cloak of anonymity and drowned whispers. A woman heading out with a bait bucket, or a man checking his pots, raised far fewer eyebrows than a daytime stroll without purpose. Historians still argue whether these clandestine meetings were widespread acts of quiet rebellion against suffocating social norms, or rare, desperate gambits by a marginalized few, their frequency wildly overstated by village gossip that thrived on scandal. Was the moonlit beach a common refuge for the heart-starved, or just a romanticized notion in a world ruled by surveillance? The quirky, perilously ingenious tidbit, the kelp call. Communication was the biggest hurdle. How to confirm the meeting, or signal danger. Enter the humble kelp bulb. Washed up on the shingle, these rubbery, gas-filled pods could be dried slightly. If squeezed sharply, they emitted a faint, wet, popping sound. Phut, easily mistaken for a bursting bubble in the surf or a crab scuttling over rocks. A series of pops, phut, phut phut, from the dunes above the beach could mean all clear, come down. A single, sharp PFFT from near the meeting spot might be a frantic danger. Patrol. Often a night watchman or a particularly nosy elder taking a constitutional. It was a language of risk, spoken through bladderwrack. Finding a specific, unpopped kelp bulb left near your bait shed door wasn't an accident. It was an invitation etched in seaweed, a tangible token of the planned peril. Feel the terrifying thrill. You wait until the cottage snores settle into a deep rhythm. You slip out, not through the creaky front door, but maybe a loose back window shutter, landing softly on the damp earth. The cold night air bites, sharp and clean after the cottage fog. The moon, if it's out, casts long, skeletal shadows. Every rustle in the gorse, every owl hoot, sounds like a footstep. You move like a ghost, keeping to the darker patches, the bait bucket a flimsy prop clutched in your trembling hand. Down the familiar path, now transformed into a smuggler's route. The shingle crunches treacherously underfoot. You reach the agreed spot, past the looming silhouette of the black rock, its base slick with seaweed. The sea sighs, a vast, indifferent accomplice. And then, a shape detaches itself from the deeper shadows. No words, at first. Just presence. Close. The relief of seeing them, whole and there, is almost painful. A hand finds yours in the dark, not clasping, just resting, cold skin against cold skin. The simple, shocking reality of touch, unmediated, unwatched. You might walk, not far, just along the tide line, the foam hissing around your boots. Words come then, hushed, urgent, tumbling out, not declarations of love, but confessions of the daily grind. Henderson's smirk, the weight of the dowry barrels, the ache of the empty bed, the suffocating kindness. Or sometimes, just silence, shared, listening to the sea and the frantic hammering of your own heart, savoring the profound, stolen gift of not being seen. The moments are measured in heartbeats, not minutes. Every sound is amplified. A distant bark, a shifted rock. The kelp call stays silent, but the tension coils tighter. The luxury of anonymity is paper-thin. Getting caught wouldn't just mean scandal. It could mean being cast out, losing credit, becoming unmarriageable, a burden the village might finally refuse to bear. The risk is existential. Yet, the pull is primal. This sliver of wet sand under the indifferent moon isn't about passion. It's about reclaiming a shred of self, of agency, of simple human connection away from the crushing weight of communal expectation and perpetual performance. It's breathing air not filtered through the fish-scented, judgment-laden atmosphere of the village. The hand in yours isn't just comfort. It's a lifeline thrown across the chasm of enforced isolation. Dawn is the enemy. The faintest lightening in the east signals retreat. The shared silence deepens, heavy with the impending separation. A final squeeze of the hand, colder now. No promises. Just the shared understanding of the risk, the preciousness of the stolen time. You turn, melting back into the shadows, the bait bucket suddenly heavy again, not with clams, but with the weight of returning to your role. The walk back feels longer, the cottage walls loom larger. You slip inside, the chill of the night clinging to your clothes. Behind the curtain, the empty bed feels emptier, yet somehow less desolate. You carry the memory of the salt wind on your face, the cold press of a hand in the dark, the vast, roaring indifference of the sea that, for a few stolen moments, felt like freedom, not a threat. Date night is a pocket of stolen silence on a noisy shore, a rebellion measured in heartbeats and kelp pops, a fragile, dangerous testament to the human spirit's refusal to be entirely extinguished by watchful eyes and crushing waves. The moon sets. The village wakes. Widow Carter resumes her duties. But deep inside, beneath the layers of wool and obligation, the memory of the shingle beach at midnight glows like a smuggled ember. Section 20. The rhythmic scrape of your knife against the cod spine isn't just work. It's a metronome counting the relentless passage of time in gloomy harbor. One season bleeds into the next. The frantic scramble of spring, the back-breaking haul of summer, the anxious harvest of autumn, the claustrophobic freeze of winter, the grey vigil of waiting. Years grind past, marked not by anniversaries or grand celebrations, but by the deepening lines on your face, the new patches on your oilskins, the silent accumulation of losses in the village graveyard, and the undeniable, demanding presence growing within your own crowded cottage, children. That tentative spark kindled by herbs, dances, or moonlit beaches inevitably confronts the village's starkest reality: procreation. Forget baby showers or gender reveals. Here, children aren't just bundles of joy. They are future labor, potential anchors, and immediate, all-consuming burdens in a world perpetually balanced on the edge. Date-night romance calcifies into the brutal arithmetic of survival, multiplied. The infant arrives, not in a sterile room, but in the stifling heat and blood-scented gloom of the main room, the thin curtain hastily drawn. The midwife, likely Widow Pike or her equivalent, barks orders. Your mother-in-law hovers. The child's first cry isn't greeted with coos, but with a communal sigh of relief. It breathes. That's the first hurdle cleared. The tiny, wrinkled creature is swaddled in rough linen, laid in a makeshift cradle near the hearth's warmth, the safest, most monitored spot. Relief is fleeting. Now begins the true test. Every cough, every bout of colic, every feverish whimper is a fresh terror. You watch its tiny chest rise and fall with a vigilance honed by constant loss. The village average isn't kind. You know this. The graveyard's smallest markers are a silent chorus of warning. You count days, then weeks, then months. Each milestone a victory snatched from the indifferent jaws of disease, malnutrition, and the pervasive damp cold. Sleep becomes a fragmented memory, stolen between feedings and the relentless demands of maintaining the household engine. The warm weight of the infant against your chest during a pre-dawn feeding is both profound connection and profound exhaustion. Here's the mainstream historical fact that shaped every parental breath. Infant and child mortality rates in 19th century rural America, especially in harsh environments like coastal villages, were devastatingly high. Estimates suggest 1 in 4 children died before their first birthday. Nearly half didn't reach adulthood. Causes were legion: respiratory infections, pneumonia, bronchitis, gastrointestinal diseases, cholera infantum, dysentery from contaminated water, malnutrition, accidents, and the ever-present specter of epidemics like smallpox or diphtheria sweeping through the crowded cottages. Raising a child to adulthood wasn't an expectation. It was a desperate, often heartbreaking gamble against overwhelming odds. Every child who survived was a minor miracle and a vital future asset. Historians still argue whether this constant proximity to loss fostered a necessary emotional detachment as a coping mechanism, or if the profound, visceral love parents felt was simply amplified by the ever-present terror of impending grief, making each healthy day a stolen treasure. Did pragmatism numb the heart, or did the constant threat make every graspable moment of connection more fiercely precious? The quirky, gut-wrenchingly practical tidbit: the herring scale. Forget modern growth charts. Assessing an infant's health and potential for survival involved brutal pragmatism. One method used involved comparing the baby's weight, not to a chart, but to a known quantity readily available: salt herring. A healthy newborn, some midwives claimed, should feel about the heft of a good, plump salt herring in the hand. As the child grew, comparisons shifted: heftier than 2 herring now, or still only 1.5 herring, needs more gruel. It was a measurement born of necessity and the omnipresent fish economy. A child failing to meet its herring quota was a cause for deep concern, triggering intensified efforts with precious resources like goat's milk or thinned gruel. The scale wasn't affectionate. It was a cold assessment of viability in a world where every ounce mattered. A mother might murmur, "She's taking well, near 2 herring already," with a pride that mingled love with relief at the child's increasing economic potential. They grow. Slowly. Awkwardly. The toddler staggers across the packed earth floor, grabbing at the hem of your skirt, tripping over fishing nets left to dry. Its world is the single smoky room, the wharf's edge under strict supervision, the endless vista of grey water. Play isn't toys, it's mimicking labor, stacking pebbles like barrels, mending scraps of net with twigs, clutching a tiny wooden dory. By 5 or 6, the blessing side of the equation kicks in, hard. Tiny hands are set to work, picking rockweed for the garden, gathering mussels at low tide, watched like a hawk, carding wool, fetching small bundles of kindling, minding younger siblings. A child becomes an extra set of hands, however small and clumsy. A son promises future muscle for the boats, a daughter, future domestic labor. Their value is tangible, measured in tasks completed, burdens shared. You feel a fierce, protective pride watching them master a simple chore, a counterpoint to the constant fear. But the burden never lessens. It shifts. The gnawing anxiety about their health evolves into anxiety about their safety. On the slippery rocks, near the water, handling tools. The cost of feeding and clothing growing bodies strains the precarious household economy. Henderson's ledger grows thicker. Arguments flare in the cramped space, stress finding release in sharp words over spilled milk or broken dish. The profound intimacy forged in shared survival battles against the sheer, grinding exhaustion and the lack of any private space to nurture the original spark between you and your partner. Romance is a memory buried under layers of fish scales, dirty laundry, and the immediate needs of the small humans you brought into this harsh world. Love manifests as the silent agreement to take the overnight watch with a feverish child, the shared glance of weary solidarity over the heads of squabbling siblings, the rare, almost forgotten touch of hands while mending a net together after dusk, too tired for words, finding a fragile connection in the shared rhythm of work and the overwhelming weight of responsibility. Date night is the bone-deep weariness at the end of a day where no one died, no one got badly hurt, and the nets, the children, and the precarious peace within the crowded cottage walls all remain, for now, intact. The hearth fire doesn't warm hearts. It illuminates the faces you fight for, a flickering testament to the terrifying, exhausting, utterly necessary gamble of bringing life into a world perpetually shadowed by the sea's indifference and the village's watchful, demanding embrace. The infant's cry that once signaled fragile life now blends with the gull's screech and the wind's moan, the unending soundtrack of survival, generation after generation, on the unforgiving edge. Section 21. The relentless grey grind of gloomy harbour is broken, not by sunshine, but by sanctioned, communal frenzy. The harvest is in, such as it is. Scraggly potatoes dug from rocky plots, tough-skinned squash, the last tough greens, maybe a few precious apples hauled from stunted trees inland. It's not abundance, it's survival stockpiled. Yet, the village declares a festival. Not for joy, exactly, but because even granite needs a crack to prevent shattering. The Harvest Feast. Forget county fairs or music festivals. This is a Puritan-approved loophole, a single, straining valve releasing the pressure of a year's worth of suppressed energy, fear, and yes, longing. Date night constraints loosen, twisting into elaborate, ritualized courtship dances performed under the watchful, yet momentarily permissive, eyes of the entire village. It's flirting with training wheels, mandated by the elders. The air crackles, different from the barn dance. Less desperate, more focused. The meeting house green, usually a patch of mud and tough grass, is transformed. Bonfires crackle, defying the encroaching autumn chill, casting long, dancing shadows. Makeshift trestle tables grown under platters of roasted fish, of course, stews thickened with barley, dense loaves of rye bread, and the rare luxury of wild berries stewed into a tart compote. The smells mingle, wood smoke, fish, earth, and the faint, almost forgotten sweetness of fruit. People wear their other best clothes, woolens brushed, bonnets re-ribboned, maybe a scrap of lace daringly displayed at a collar. Colors seem brighter in the firelight, faces less gaunt. Laughter rings out, sharper, clearer than the usual tavern drone. Even Widow Pike manages a thin smile near the cider barrel. It feels dangerous, this collective exhale. You see them across the firelight. The months, maybe years, of stolen glances, herb bundles, chaperoned walks, and the crushing weight of survival momentarily lift. Here, proximity isn't just possible, it's the point. The fiddlers strike up, not the frantic reels of the barn, but older, statelier tunes passed down like precious heirlooms. The caller, often the preacher himself tonight, his stern face softened slightly by the fire's glow, announces the dance. It's not a free-for-all. It's a courting ritual, codified by generations. Lines form, partners face each other. This time, the chaperones aren't lurking at the edges. They're in the lines, participating, their watchfulness woven into the dance itself. Here's the mainstream historical fact that structures this release. Seasonal festivals like harvest feasts were vital social and economic safety valves in pre-industrial communities. They marked the end of a major labor cycle, harvesting, a successful fishing season, allowed for the redistribution of surplus, however meager, reinforced community bonds through shared ritual, and crucially, provided a strictly regulated space for courtship and matchmaking under the elders' supervision. The dances weren't just fun, they were functional social engineering, reinforcing order while permitting limited, structured interaction. Historians still argue whether these rituals genuinely offered young people a meaningful, albeit controlled, avenue for connection and choice, or if they primarily serve to reinforce existing social hierarchies, display eligible candidates like livestock, and channel youthful energy into predetermined paths endorsed by the community, effectively making courtship a public performance with little room for genuine personal preference. Did the dance floor offer agency, or just a prettier cage? The quirky, rigidly choreographed tidbit, the three-turn rule. During specific, slower figures of the dance, a couple might be granted sanctioned turns. Not free spins, but a prescribed number of rotations, hand in hand, around a central point, often marked by a lantern or a particularly large turnip lantern. The number was sacrosanct: 3. Not 2, not 4. 3 slow, stately rotations. This was the absolute pinnacle of sanctioned intimacy. For those 3 turns, under the approving gaze of the community and the flickering light, you held their hand, felt the pressure of their palm, met their eyes without immediate censure. The entire village watched, but they watched approvingly. It was the culmination of months of coded herbs and chaperoned walks, condensed into 3 revolutions. A young man might press a small, smooth stone into his partner's palm during the second turn, a tangible token of the moment. A young woman might dare a fleeting, genuine smile. The tension was exquisite, the connection intense precisely because it was so brief, so public, and so utterly prescribed. The fourth turn never came. The caller's voice would cut in, pulling the dancers back into the larger pattern. The stone in the palm burned like a coal, a secret shared in plain sight. Feel the brittle energy. You step forward, your hand finding theirs for the grand chain figure. The touch is electric after months of enforced distance. The rough wool of their sleeve, the callus on their palm, familiar yet shockingly present. You move down the line, briefly clasping other hands, but it's a blur. Your awareness narrows to the moment when the caller booms, "Gentlemen, turn your partners." This is it. The sanctioned orbit. You face them. Hands clasp. You begin the slow, measured turn. 1. The firelight catches their eyes. 2. The noise of the crowd fades to a murmur. Your fingers tighten slightly. 3. The stone is pressed into your hand, cool and smooth. Time stretches, impossibly. Then, promenade. The connection breaks. The world rushes back, the fiddles, the stomping feet, the smell of smoke and cider. You clutch the stone in your pocket, a tiny, hard-won piece of magic. Later, during a weaving figure, your arms might brush as you pass. Or near the cider table, you might manage a whispered, "The turnips glow well tonight," a coded nonsense phrase carrying the weight of the 3 turns. Every interaction is amplified, precious, and intensely monitored, not for impropriety now, but for adherence to the ritual, for signs of compatibility noted by matchmaking matrons. The festival doesn't end with a bang, but a gradual dimming. The fires burn low. The food is gone. The dancers slow, fatigue replacing exhilaration. The fiddles play a final, gentle air. People drift away, back towards cottages, carrying the warmth of the fire and the lingering echo of the dance. The sanctioned freedom recedes like the tide. Tomorrow, the nets need mending, the salt fish turning, the relentless work resumes. But the memory of the 3 turns, the weight of the stone in your pocket, the fleeting, intense connection made under the approving gaze of the community, it lingers. It's fuel. It's a promise, not of easy love, but of a potential partnership recognized, a path forward subtly endorsed. Date night at the harvest feast isn't wild abandon. It's courtship elevated to a communal sacrament, a rigidly choreographed ballet where the slightest touch, the briefest meeting of eyes during 3 prescribed rotations, carries the weight of 1,000 stolen moments, offering a fragile, firelit glimpse of a future that still demands to be earned, barrel by barrel, salted fish by salted fish, under the ever-watchful eyes of gloomy harbor. The path ahead remains steeped in brine and toil, but for one night, the rhythm wasn't set by the waves or the gutting knife, but by the fiddle, the caller, and the ancient, hopeful steps of generations turning under the harvest moon. Section 22. The gull's sails vanish over the horizon, taking him not just to the cod banks, but into a void. Weeks stretch into a grey, featureless expanse. You haul water, mend nets, salt fish, scan the horizon, the relentless rhythm of waiting. Hope isn't aflame, It's a stubborn ember banked against the damp chill of absence. Then, a ripple breaks the monotony. Young Billy Tarr comes pelting down the muddy track from the store, breathless, waving a small, grubby rectangle like a captured bird. For you, Widow Carter, came on the Merryweather packet. The words hang in the salt air. Your heart stutters, then hammers against your ribs. A letter. Not just any letter. His hand. The world narrows to that smudged, water-stained paper trembling in your suddenly clumsy fingers. Forget instant messaging. Here, love letters arrive like shipwreck survivors, battered, delayed, and infinitely precious. You clutch it, the paper rough and thick beneath your calloused thumb. The journey is etched onto its surface. The ink, likely homemade from oak galls and iron salts, has bled and blurred in patches, victim of spray and damp. Salt crystals crust the edges like tiny diamonds of the sea that separates you. The paper itself feels stiff, brittle in places, soft and pulpy in others where seawater breached its imperfect seal, maybe just folded tightly, or sealed with a clumsy dab of candle wax or fish glue. The address is a miracle of legibility against the odds. Martha Carter, Gloomy Harbor, by way of Portsmouth packet. Getting it this far feels like divine intervention. You find a rare moment of solitude, maybe crouched behind the woodpile, or in the dank chill of the privy, anywhere the watching eyes momentarily lapse. The act of unfolding it requires care. The paper threatens to tear along its salt-weakened creases. Here's the mainstream historical fact that makes this scrap a minor miracle. Reliable mail service to remote coastal villages was haphazard, slow, and expensive in the early to mid-19th century. Letters relied on infrequent packet ships carrying goods and passengers between major ports like Boston or Portsmouth. These packets might only call at outports like Gloomy Harbor sporadically, depending on weather, cargo, and profit. A letter written in Boston could take weeks, even months, to reach a fishing village, passing through multiple hands and vessels, exposed to the elements every step of the way. The cost of postage was significant, often paid by the recipient, adding another layer of anxiety. Receiving a letter meant owing Henderson money. Historians still argue whether this agonizingly slow, fragmented communication deepened emotional bonds through the sheer effort and anticipation involved, or if the delays, uncertainties, and physical degradation of the messages primarily amplified loneliness, frustration, and misunderstandings, making the connection feel more fragile than sustaining. Did the waiting forge stronger longing, or just breed despair? The quirky, deeply human tidbit, the fragmented heart. Knowing letters might be lost, damaged, or read by others, packet captains, storekeepers, lovers developed ingenious ways to safeguard their most private thoughts. One method involved writing the letter, then carefully cutting it into irregular pieces, like a puzzle. These fragments would be sent separately, tucked into different letters carried by different ships, or given to different sailors heading vaguely in the right direction. A single sentence might arrive months before the next scrap. The recipient would collect these pieces, storing them like sacred relics, waiting until enough arrived to assemble the full message. The joy wasn't just in reading the words, but in the physical act of reconstruction, piecing together the sender's thoughts like salvaging driftwood to build a raft of connection. Finding a new fragment was an event, a tangible piece of the absent loved one slotting into place. The completed letter, even if stained and torn, was a mosaic of endurance. Reading it is an act of archaeology. You squint at the faded, blurred script. Whole words are swallowed by salt stains, reduced to tantalizing ghosts. The weather has been blurred smudge, fierce. We lost 2 nets off Grand. Water stain obscuring the rest. Your mind races, filling the gaps with terrifying possibilities. Grand Manon, Grand Banks, lost men, lost nets. His assurances, I am well, my dearest. Ink run, think of you constantly, are islands of clarity in a sea of ambiguity. You parse not just the words, but the spaces between them, the pressure of the quill. Did he press harder when writing dearest? The slight tremor in a curve that might indicate fatigue or cold. You read it once, fast, hungry for substance. Then again, slow, savoring each decipherable phrase. Then a third time, searching for hidden meanings in the blots, the smudges, the very grain of the paper he touched weeks or months ago, far out on the heaving grey vastness. The physicality of it is profound. This object has traveled the sea that holds him, carrying the imprint of his hand, stained by the same salt that cakes his oilskins. The emotional toll is complex. A surge of relief. He was alive when he wrote this. A pang of anguish. But when? And what has happened since? The fragmented messages amplify the uncertainty. A piece arriving in spring might speak of winter storms long past, but the danger feels immediate. A mention of a minor injury, took a knock from a swinging block, shoulder sore, but blossoms into terrifying scenarios in the silence that follows. The letter doesn't bridge the distance. It underscores it, highlighting the chasm of time and experience between the moment the ink dried and the moment it lands in your salt-roughened hand. Yet, it's everything. You fold it carefully along its original creases, reverently, as if handling a holy relic. It finds a home tucked inside your shift, against your skin, or buried deep in the hope chest beside the whalebone letter opener and the dried lavender. It becomes a talisman, carried through the days, its presence a whisper of connection. You take it out in stolen moments, while stirring the pot, walking to the well, not necessarily to reread, but just to feel its weight, to trace the blurred lines of his script with a fingertip, a tactile prayer for his safety. Writing back is its own agony. Finding paper is a challenge. Maybe a precious sheet bought from Henderson, or the back of a discarded shipping manifest begged from the store. Ink is precious. Time alone to compose your thoughts is rarer still. You pour your heart onto the page, the worry, the daily struggles, news of the village, the children's growth measured in herrings. Then comes the terrifying vulnerability, entrusting this fragile vessel of your heart to the capricious sea and the indifferent hands of packet captains and storekeepers. Will it reach him? Will it arrive as stained and fragmented as his did? Will he even be alive to read it? You seal it with trembling hands, perhaps adding a tiny, coded mark only he would recognize, a specific pattern of dots near the seal, a particular fold. Sending it feels like casting a message in a bottle into a hurricane, hoping against hope it finds its mark. Then, the wait begins anew, longer and more anxious, for the confirmation that your words reached him, carried on the same indifferent currents that might, at any moment, swallow him whole. Date night is the silent communion with a salt-stained, ink-blurred rectangle of paper, a conversation stretched over months and miles of treacherous ocean, where the most profound intimacy lies in deciphering the ghosts of words and clinging to the faint, material proof that, somewhere on the vast, grey deep, a hand once moved to form your name. Section 23. The rhythm of Gloomy Harbour is the rhythm of the tides, predictable, relentless, grinding. Net, salt, haul, mend, wait. Repeat. It lulls you into a grey acceptance. But sometimes, the tide throws up more than seaweed and driftwood. Sometimes, it deposits scandal. Not whispered rumours this time, not idle store gossip, but something raw, undeniable, explosive enough to crack the village's carefully maintained facade of pious endurance. An illicit kiss witnessed behind the smokehouse. A sudden, unexplained midnight departure. A young woman's belly swelling unmistakably before any banns are read. The air curdles. The watchful eyes narrow, not with concern, but with predatory focus. Date night whispers curdle into public crucifixion, where the communal embrace becomes a crushing vice of judgment. It starts with a ripple. A hissed conversation near the well cuts off abruptly as you approach. Eyes slide away. The usual morning greetings are clipped, cold. Widow Pike's expression is grim, not sorrowful, but vindicated. Henderson, behind his counter, polishes his spectacles with undue intensity, avoiding your gaze. The village feels different, charged, brittle. Then, the news hits like a rogue wave. Eli Carter's wife, Martha, seen slipping from Josiah Briggs' cottage near dawn. Josiah, whose own wife is visiting her ailing mother 3 coves over. The details are sparse, brutal. A neighbor fetching water saw the door close. Saw her skirt vanish inside. Saw the lamp extinguished. Silence. Then, much later, the door opening, Martha slipping away, head down, shawl pulled tight. Denial is impossible. The evidence is human eyes and the village's insatiable hunger for sin. Here's the mainstream historical fact that fuels the fire. Puritan communities enforce strict moral codes through public shaming, church discipline, and civil penalties. Adultery wasn't just a personal failing. It was a crime against God and community, threatening divine retribution and social order. Confession before the congregation, public penance, often involving the wearing of a letter sewn onto clothing, fines, whippings, or even banishment were real possibilities. The meeting house became a courtroom, the congregation the jury. Reputation wasn't just social currency, it was survival. A shattered reputation meant ostracism, loss of credit, inability to find work or marriage partners, effectively a social death sentence in a community where interdependence was mandatory. Historians still argue whether this brutal enforcement genuinely maintained social cohesion and deterred transgressions, or if it primarily fostered hypocrisy, secret lives, and a culture of malicious gossip that destroyed lives over unproven allegations or minor deviations from an impossible standard. Did the scaffold ensure order, or merely provide communal theatre for cruelty? The quirky, devastatingly tangible tidbit, the lobster pot plot. In this specific scandal, the physical evidence wasn't just eyewitnesses, it was lobsters. Josiah Briggs was known for his distinctive way of tying the knot securing his lobster pot boys, a complex double hitch with a specific twist of tarred twine. The morning after Martha's alleged visit, Old Man Tar, checking his own pots near Briggs' marker buoy, found one of his pots missing. Dragging the area, he hauled up not his pot, but one of Briggs'. Nothing unusual there. Pots drifted. But tangled inside the pot, caught in the slats, was a torn scrap of dark blue calico. A fabric widow pike, with her hawk eyes for domestic details, immediately identified as matching the pattern of Martha Carter's best Sunday apron, noted just last Sabbath. The lobster pot wasn't just lost gear. It became Exhibit A, a soggy, barnacled testament to the affair, dragged up for all to see. The torn calico, snagged like a fish, became the irrefutable symbol of her transgression, gossiped about more than the eyewitness account. It was evidence you could point to, tangible proof hauled from the indifferent sea itself to damn her. The fallout is swift and merciless. The preacher's next sermon is a roaring inferno of condemnation, thick with references to Jezebel and divine wrath, his gaze burning holes in the spot where Martha sits, rigid and pale, flanked by stone-faced relatives. Eli, back from sea, is a storm contained, silent, vibrating with a fury that terrifies the children. He doesn't confront Josiah publicly. The village expects that to come later, likely violent, likely bloody. Martha is instantly ostracized. Women cross the muddy street to avoid her. Men turn their backs. Children are hushed and pulled away if she approaches. The Carter cottage becomes a leper colony. Henderson politely informs her that her credit is suspended. Work dries up. Even fetching water becomes a gauntlet of silent stares and averted eyes. The communal support that sustained widows vanishes. Her sin places her beyond the pale. She is adrift, utterly alone in the crowded village, the weight of their collective judgment heavier than any widow's shawl. The village feasts on it. The scandal becomes the sole topic at the well, in the store, behind hands during meeting house. Details are embellished. Motives are invented. Josiah is painted as a predator, Martha as a wanton seductress, or perhaps a desperate fool. The lobster pot fragment is passed around like a relic, the torn calico analyzed thread by thread. The original eyewitness account grows more lurid with each retelling. The affair is dissected not with sorrow, but with a grim, righteous relish. It reinforces their own virtue, their own adherence to the harsh code. It's a diversion from their own miseries, a shared spectacle of sin and punishment. The fragile peace of the harvest feast is obliterated. Yet, beneath the public condemnation, watch for the cracks. See Widow Pike, days later, leave a small bundle of dried thyme and a wedge of hard cheese on the Carter doorstep after dusk. No note. Just time, courage. See Old Man Tar, who found the damning pot, accidentally drop a usable length of good rope near where Martha is struggling to haul water alone. See the flicker of pity in young Billy Tarr's eyes before his mother jerks him away. The village machine demands punishment, but individual hearts sometimes whisper doubt or memory of their own hidden struggles. The judgment isn't monolithic, but it's the roar that drowns out the whispers. Martha's fate hangs in the balance. Public penance, banishment, a violent reckoning from Eli. The scandal isn't just about two people. It's a quake that fractures families, forges new enmities, and leaves the wharf humming with a tension thicker than the smell of fish. The tides still turn, the nets still need hauling, but date night for the whole village has become a grim vigil, waiting for the next act of the tragedy to unfold, their own righteousness a brittle shield against the unsettling truth that sin, like the sea, is vast, deep, and capable of drowning anyone caught unprepared in its treacherous currents. The lobster pot sits by Henderson's store, a silent, barnacled accuser, reminding everyone that the most dangerous traps aren't always under the water. Section 24. The years grind like pebbles under the relentless tide. You raise children who become adults etched with the same salt-roughened lines. You bury parents, neighbors, eventually even widow pike beneath the wind-stunted pines in the graveyard overlooking the restless grey. You survive storms, poor seasons, the gnawing dread of the empty horizon. The village changes, yet remains stubbornly itself. New faces arrive, immigrants speaking broken English, lured by the cod, bringing different accents but quickly adopting the same wary stoicism. Bigger boats appear, powered by steam and greed, scouring the banks cleaner than any dory fleet could. The store stocks tinned peaches from California, kerosene lamps brighter than whale oil, bolts of cheap, bright cotton from Lowell Mills. Yet, the damp chill still seeps into bones, the gulls still scream at dawn, and the sea remains the final, indifferent arbiter of fate. And somehow, amidst the clatter of progress, echoes of the old ways cling, like stubborn barnacles to a wharf piling. Date night, you realize, watching your granddaughter fret over a trip to Portland with a young man isn't a modern invention. It's the ghost of gloomy harbor's gritty courtship, haunting the lobster shacks and coastal towns of a new century. See it in the lingering practicalities. Your granddaughter's beau isn't judged solely on charm or shared interests. Does he have a steady job on a dragger? Own his own truck? Know how to fix an outboard motor in a squall? The questions mirror the wharf assessments of old, proof of viability. Her dowry isn't barrels, but perhaps a community college degree in marine biology or a share in her family's lobster boat license. The language of survival has evolved, but the grammar remains. Partnership demands tangible contribution. The old women at the diner still gossip, sharp eyes missing nothing, a digital age version of the store surveillance. Reputation is still currency, traded on Facebook groups instead of whalebone beams. Here's the mainstream historical fact underpinning this continuity. Cultural practices, particularly those forged in environments of scarcity and communal interdependence, exhibit remarkable persistence, adapting form while retaining core functions. The isolation and shared hardship of 19th-century fishing villages created deeply ingrained social patterns around courtship, marriage, and gender roles. While technology and economy changed, the underlying values, pragmatism, resilience, the importance of demonstrated capability, the weight of community observation, seeped into the regional character. They became part of the Down East DNA, shaping social interactions long after the specific contexts of cod liver oil gifts or whalebone gossip faded. Historians still argue whether this represents a genuine, unbroken cultural transmission of values, or a nostalgic, romanticized projection of the past onto modern behaviors that have fundamentally different motivations. Are modern Mainers unconsciously channeling their ancestors' pragmatism, or is it simply Yankee thrift and common sense mislabeled as historical echo? Now, the quirky, faintly absurd modern tidbit, the lobster roll litmus test. Forget fancy dinners. In coastal Maine, the first significant date for a local couple might involve a pilgrimage to a specific, unpretentious lobster shack, the kind with plastic picnic tables, paper napkins, and a decades-old reputation. Ordering isn't just about hunger, it's a subtle performance. Does he know which shack has the best lobster meat-to-filler ratio? Does she opt for the classic roll with just mayo and a hint of lettuce, or commit the sacrilege of adding celery? Does he meticulously pick every shred of meat from the claws, demonstrating patience and respect for the resource? Does she casually mention her uncle's boat hauled the lobsters yesterday, establishing local cred? The shared, messy consumption of the lobster roll, cracking shells, wiping butter off chins, debating the merits of drawn butter versus mayo, becomes a low-key, practical assessment. It's about shared appreciation for the local bounty, demonstrated competence in navigating a fundamentally messy experience, and comfort in unpretentious surroundings. It's the spiritual descendant of sharing a fat cod wrapped in kelp, a declaration of belonging and capability, wrapped in a butter-soaked bun. Finding someone who navigates a lobster shack with unpretentious skill and respect for the ritual? That's worth more than a dozen swanky restaurant reservations. The watchfulness endures, softened but present. Your granddaughter mentions her date. His family's from Jonesport, you note. Immediately, mental connections fire. Related to the Briggs who lost the Morning Star in '92. The network, the web of reputation and connection, still functions. Gossip still flows, faster now, through texts and social media. But the fundamental impulse, to know, to assess, to place someone within the community fabric, remains. The chaperones are gone, replaced by the softer scrutiny of parents asking, "So, what does his father do?" And friends reporting sightings, saw them walking marginal way, looked serious. Privacy is greater, yes, but the expectation of eventual public acknowledgement, of fitting into the community rhythm, persists. Elopements still cause ripples. Marriages are still communal events, often held in repurposed barns or by the shore, echoing the harvest feast gatherings. Even the language of love carries faint accents of the past. Terms of endearment might be modern, but the way affection is shown often leans practical. Fixing a leaky faucet for her becomes a love letter. Knitting him thick socks for winter, even if bought yarn replaces homespun wool, carries the echo of "I'll keep you warm and functional." A young man restoring a vintage wooden dory, a useless but beautiful nod to the past, is performing a similar declaration of patience and skill as the whittled button of old. The stoicism remains. 2. Public displays of grand passion are still rare. Deep feeling is often communicated through shared labor. Painting a house together, stacking firewood, navigating a tough fishing season side by side, or quiet, steadfast presence during hardship, mirroring the silent endurance of the past. The sea, of course, still casts its long shadow. Relationships falter under the strain of long absences, not just fishing trips now, but deployments, trucking routes, or jobs on oil rigs. The anxiety during a nor'easter, the scan of the marine forecast, the understanding that livelihoods and lives are still tied to the capricious ocean. These are threads woven from the same tough fiber as the wives waiting for the gull. The community still gathers in times of loss, casseroles appearing on doorsteps, offers of practical help flowing, the digital age version of chopping the widow's woodpile. So, as you watch your granddaughter wave goodbye, heading out for her lobster roll assessment, you see the ghost of gloomy harbor flicker in her nervous excitement, in the practical questions she'll implicitly ask, in the community that will inevitably dissect her choice. Date night hasn't vanished. It shed its whalebone corset and woolen shawl. It wears jeans and drives a pickup truck. But beneath the surface, the currents still flow, the pragmatic evaluation, the weight of communal expectation, the need for proven resilience, the love expressed in actions more than words, and the ever-present whisper of the vast, grey Atlantic, reminding everyone that life and love on this coast remains a partnership forged not just with each other, but with the enduring, demanding spirit of the place itself. The salt air hasn't lost its bite. It just carries different stories now, whispered on the same relentless wind. Section 25. The salt-scrubbed cottages of Gloomy Harbour soften at the edges, their sharp lines blurring like ink on wet paper. The gulls' cries grow distant, muffled, as if heard through thick wool. The wharf's pungent cocktail of fish guts, tar, and seaweed fades, replaced by the clean, damp scent of memory. You feel yourself drifting, not asleep, not awake, but suspended in the tide between then and now. The relentless grind, the pre-dawn gulls, the bone-aching haul, the suffocating watchfulness, the crushing weight of absence, recedes like the ocean pulling back from the shingle. What remains, stubborn as a barnacle on granite, isn't the hardship, but the quiet, astonishing persistence of it, the human impulse to connect, to forge warmth against the vast, indifferent grey. That is the catch hauled from the depths of this journey. The village wasn't just a crucible of survival. It was an arena where love, stripped bare of modern frippery, proved its most resilient, unglamorous, and essential form. Think of it. Against a backdrop where a fat cod was a love letter and a chaperone's knitting needles were the drumbeat of surveillance, affection didn't die. It adapted. It became a language whispered in thyme and rosemary, a pressure of a hand during 3 sanctioned turns at the harvest dance, the agonizingly slow reconstruction of a salt-stained letter fragment by fragment. It was the shared, silent inventory of the hope chest by candlelight, the furtive squeeze of fingers under a shared blanket while the cottage snored, the grim solidarity of managing Henderson's ledger alone. It was endurance, not ecstasy. Partnership, not passion. A promise whispered not in poetry, but in the unspoken vow, I will mend your nets. I will salt your catch. I will wait. We will endure this together. Here's the mainstream historical fact that underscores this quiet triumph. Despite staggering infant mortality, economic peril, long separations, and oppressive social constraints, marriage rates in 19th century New England remained high, and many unions documented in diaries and letters revealed deep, resilient bonds forged through shared hardship. People didn't avoid partnership because it was hard, they sought it because it was necessary, and within that necessity, profound connection often took root. Historians still argue whether these bonds were primarily pragmatic alliances for survival, where affection was a fortunate byproduct, or if the shared experience of overcoming relentless adversity actively fostered a unique and profound depth of loyalty and companionship that modern, convenience-driven relationships often lack. Did necessity breed a sturdier kind of love, or simply force people to make the best of limited emotional options? Now, the quirky, poignant tidbit that lingers like wood smoke, the century-old button. Decades after the last dory sailed from Gloomy Harbor, during renovations of an old saltbox house being turned into a summer cottage, a workman pried up warped floorboards near the hearth. Nestled in the dirt and sawdust, perfectly preserved by the dry, salty environment, was a single, beautifully carved wooden button. Oak, perhaps, or maple, darkened with age, its edges smoothed by time, not touch. No initials, no markings, just the unmistakable craftsmanship of patient hands working by firelight. Finding it sparked no historical record, no family tale. Yet, its presence there, hidden near the heart of the home, whispered a silent, century-old story. Was it a courting token, accepted and cherished? A spare from a beloved garment? A tiny, whittled promise of usefulness and care, dropped and forgotten, waiting patiently in the dark to be found? That single button, devoid of context but brimming with unspoken humanity, became a tangible echo of the quiet, enduring gestures that sustained hearts when grand declarations were impossible. It's the village's last love letter, written in wood and time. The light in your mind's eye dims further. The specifics blur. Was it Eli Carter or Samuel Dodge? Did the herb bundle contain lavender or sage? The names, the faces, the exact shade of grey in the squall. They soften, retreating into the fog of the past. But the feeling remains. The ache of absence during the long vigil. The electric thrill of a shared hymnal page. The crushing weight of the dowry negotiation, undercut by a shared, desperate glance. The profound, unspeakable relief of a sail appearing on the horizon. The bone-deep weariness, and the shared warmth of a hand on yours in the dark, not for passion, but for simple, solid presence. These weren't fragments of a forgotten hardship. They were the building blocks of a love defined not by ease, but by resilience. A love that built its nest in the cracks of granite, fed on scraps of time and stolen glances, and somehow, against the brutal arithmetic of salt and survival, endured. The rhythmic sigh of the tide becomes your breath. The chill in the air softens. The village, now just an impression, a silhouette against a pearly dawn, a cluster of grey smudges on a headland, dissolves completely. You are left not with the bite of salt, but with the quiet aftertaste of perseverance. The understanding that love, in Gloomy Harbor and perhaps everywhere, wasn't a constant flame, but a stubborn ember. Banked by watchful eyes, battered by storms of circumstance, often buried deep beneath layers of wool and weariness. Yet, it never fully died. It glowed in the practical gesture, the shared burden, the silent understanding, the furtive touch, the agonizing weight. It was the quiet, unbreakable thread stitched through the rough fabric of existence, proving that even against the vast, uncaring grey of the Atlantic, or the equally vast indifference of time, the human heart possesses a resilience as deep and enduring as the tides themselves. It was less about grand romance, and more about the profound, gritty grace of simply choosing, again and again, to face the relentless dawn together. The grey light of Gloomy Harbor fades entirely now, dissolving like mist warmed by a hidden sun. The sharp cries of the gulls soften into a distant murmur, a lullaby woven from wind and memory. The weight of the nets, the chill of the pre-dawn watch, the tight press of crowded cottages, all these recede, leaving only a profound sense of quiet, like the stillness after a storm has passed out to sea. You feel the deep, rhythmic pull of your own breath, steady and slow, matching the gentle sigh of waves on a shore you can no longer see, but whose presence you feel in your bones. The stories told were not merely of hardship, but of endurance. Not just of loss, but of the quiet, astonishing persistence that flickers within the human spirit generation after generation. It's a resilience found in the smallest gestures, a whittled button, a sprig of lavender pressed between pages, the shared weight of a bucket carried home. These echoes settle around you now, not as burdens, but as a soft blanket of understanding. The vast ocean of time has carried that village away, yet its essence remains, whispering that love, in all its unglamorous, practical, stubborn forms, is the true compass that guided them through the grey, and perhaps guides us still. The salt air is but a memory on your lips now, sweet and distant. The wind's voice is only your own breath, easing into rest. The embers of their stories glow softly within you, warming the quiet dark. All is calm. All is still. The tide of consciousness ebbs gently, carrying you towards peaceful shores where dreams lap softly against the edges of sleep, as gentle and enduring as the love that weathered centuries of salt and stone. Rest now. Let the quiet hold you. The journey is done.